All right, family, we're going to get this thing started. I am Nyhiem Way, President, CEO, and co-founder of United Sons and Daughters of Freedmen. Today's workshop is for a specific purpose. When we look at our history in this country, and we look at the history of white supremacists doing everything within their power to knock us down a peg, we've never had that thing that we can utilize to defeat them with. We've never had the tool. Well, I don't want to say we didn't have them. The tools were hidden from us. They were legislated away in some instances. They were judicially constructed and reconstructed in other senses. They were omitted. Black's Law Dictionary, for instance. In today's versions of definitions like status or definitions like freedom, as I'm going to show in my presentation, you're going to see a complete difference in the way these words are being defined. And we believe that this was a conspiracy. Now, we're not conspiracy theorists, but when has this country, outside of the radical Republicans during Reconstruction, really tried to do anything to help us after that period, or what they call the end of Reconstruction? What we hope to do today is leave people, especially those that are not necessarily familiar with what we teach, with the greater understanding of how we can use freedman status moving forward. We look at the Fearless Fund, we look at all of these different groups and all of these different people who are being attacked right now for their quote unquote Black racial programs. And they are being shut down one by one. Corporate Fortune 500 companies, the tech industry, law firms particularly. One of the things that Bloom is doing and his group is attacking the law firms so that the law firms will already know that there's absolutely there's no way that you're going to be able to use us to defeat them because they've already defeated us. It is a brilliant, brilliant tactic. We believe we have the trump card. We believe that the Supreme Court, in its ruling on affirmative action and affirming a position that we at United Sons and Daughters of Freedmen have stood on for the past several years, now have a way to defeat the enemy that's on the right and on the left, because none of them want to see us repaired anyway. They think we're better as the welcome mat to wipe their feet upon as they enter in and out of the house that is called the United States of America. Brother Ali is going to come on and give a presentation. I'm going to give my presentation. At the end, Sister Antonia, who is also a board member of United Sons and Daughters of Freedmen, and Sister Saskia, who does work out in the New England area, particularly in the state of Massachusetts and Connecticut. They are going to come on and give a breakdown and a step-by-step on how to have local engagement with your local municipality so that you too can start this push for local reparations. I'm not one of those people that have to use the word state acts of atonement, and I'm not telling anybody how they should use it. If a state has it within their capacity to repair the freedmen that they've harmed, then they should repair them. And if they repair them in any way, by definition, that is called reparations. So they're going to come on and they're going to give their breakdown. We're going to have a Q&A after it's over with. So we are hoping that you all gain something from this and you're able to take it to where you are and utilize it, because that is the purpose of this workshop, and it will be the purpose of every workshop that we conduct moving forward. So, Brother Ali, are you ready?
I believe I am. I'm going to present my PowerPoint, right, which is really about, just some slides and stuff, but I'm going to actually speak about the slides and also the particular topic that I'm going to be speaking on is why we use the term freedmen and the term descendants of freedmen as opposed to descendants of slaves, or any other racial classifications like Negro or Black, whatever, particularly as it relates to the issue of reparations. So let me just, I might turn the camera off while I'm sharing, but let me just get to the PowerPoint so you guys can see. All right, so yeah, thank you guys for bearing with us. I really appreciate it, and this is important, right? So I'm going to be speaking on why freedmen or descendants of freedmen and not Negroes or descendants of slaves or slavery. Why we use these terminologies as opposed to the other ones. So I start off with this. In his famous 1963 I Have a Dream speech, Dr. King invoked the nation's founding 1776 Declaration and its principles of liberty for all men. King stated, "I have a dream that one day this nation will rise up and live out the true meaning of its creed. We hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal. And when the architects of our republic wrote the magnificent words of the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence, they were signing a promissory note to which every American was to fall heir. This was a promise that all men, yes, Black men as well as white men, would be guaranteed the unalienable rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness." This is what King quoted. Now, many believe that the principles of liberty enshrined in the Declaration of Independence never applied to Black people, particularly since the said God-given rights or unalienable rights mentioned were in fact alienated from those classed as Blacks, colors, Negroes, etc. Thus, many would take the position that Dr. King was actually in error to suggest it was a promissory note to which Black men would fall heir. Was Dr. King wrong here, or did the creed of the Declaration also apply to Black men? What does any of that have to do with why those of us who are freedmen conscious describe our families as freedmen and descendants of freedmen as opposed to Negroes and descendants of slaves or even slavery? Now, to adequately answer these questions, we have to first examine important facts of American history and answer some prerequisite questions. Like, number one, were the ancestors who were enslaved in bondage against their will actually members of the human family, or were they simply the Negro beasts of burden that Europeans supposed that they were? Number two, were the enslaved ancestors not men and women endowed by their creator with said unalienable rights, or were they subject to alienation of rights by colonial and state actors obsessed with oppression? Is there any evidence, number three, is there any evidence to support the idea that the Declaration's principles of equality and liberty apply to Black men as well as white men, as Dr. King stated? And number four, was slavery legal, or was it an unconstitutional institution that was tolerated via a series of compromises between the original northern and southern states? And if it was unconstitutional, was slavery in contradiction to and in violation of the constitutional laws of England, the founding declaration, and a violation of the right to the writ of habeas corpus? Number five, what was Lincoln quoted as saying in regards to the freedmen and their involvement in the Civil War? And six, were the promises and commitments of Reconstruction made to the slave class or to the class of freedmen? I have two more questions, but I'm going to leave those two questions for Brother Nyhiem to answer. The last two questions are, number seven, are today's living freedmen descendants also members of the freedmen class? And if so, how do we know? Does Roman law influence American jurisprudence? That's number seven. It's a two-part question. And number eight, what did the Supreme Court of the United States, the justices, recently have to say in regards to the historical and legal use of the term freedman? Now, in order to properly frame the answers, I like to preface them by using the freedmen of the so-called five civilized tribes as an example, particularly because they never stopped using the term freedmen in reference to their families. So with them, We have those known as Cherokee Freedmen, Chickasaw Freedmen, Choctaw Freedmen, Creek Freedmen, and Seminole Freedmen. These names serve as their ethnic identifiers, which distinguishes them from those of us commonly known as African Americans, i.e., the 13th Amendment freedmen. The terms freedman or freedmen also denotes an acquired status, usually by some lawful means. Usually by some lawful means. What's important to also note about the Indian freedmen families is that when speaking specifically of their ancestry, they use terms such as freedmen descendants, freedmen and their descendants, or descendants of freedmen. And although their emancipated ancestors were formerly enslaved just as ours were, what you don't see the Indian freedmen do is refer to themselves as descendants of slaves or descendants of slavery, and with good reason. In a 2021 article published by High Country News entitled "7 Questions About Freedmen Answered," these points were expounded on by the author. For example, the article's opening paragraph states that Marilyn Vann began her groundbreaking position as the first Cherokee citizen of freedman status to hold a position within the Cherokee Nation government. Now, this speaks to the fact that this woman is a Cherokee citizen of freedman ancestry and the inherited status, who also holds a position in the government of the Cherokee Nation. So not only is she of freedman ancestry, but she also has the inherited status of freedman, and she is a citizen and holds a position in the Cherokee Nation's government. This is important for those who have made themselves believe that citizenship in a nation somehow abolishes the status of freedmen. The article continues, quote, "When slavery ended in the 5 tribes after the Civil War, the formerly enslaved people became known as freedmen. They spoke tribal languages, ate tribal food, and lived in the manner of the tribes of their former owners. By any cultural metric, they were Choctaw, Chickasaw, Cherokee, Muskogee, and Seminole people. The ethnic identities of the descendants of the freedmen are distinct from both African Americans and tribal members generally. Anyone who has a freedman ancestor is a freedman descendant." Speaking of ancestry, these are the terms they use. Whether their ancestor appears on the by blood or the freedman rolls, it remains an ethnic and ancestral identity. But freedman status is an official designation, meaning that the tribe views you as part of a designated class and limits or extends your rights accordingly, end quote. Now, finally, the article states, quote, "The tribes promised to enroll freedmen, but didn't. When slavery ended in the United States, it didn't end for them. By fighting for the Confederacy in the United States Civil War, the 5 tribes had forfeited the rights set out in earlier treaties with the United States. So in 1866, after the Civil War ended, they signed new treaties with the US government. The new treaties directed them to end slavery and extend citizenship rights to the freedmen. But the tribes delayed for years, leaving freedmen with no country. At the time, they were not recognized as either tribal or American citizens. Eventually, some of the 5 tribes did enroll the freedmen, only to disenroll them later," end quote. Now, fortunately or unfortunately, members or citizens of the 5 tribes, including freedmen, were not U.S. citizens and did not receive U.S. citizenship until the 1901 5 Tribes Citizenship Act was passed. And regardless of any imposed racial misnomers such as Negro or anything like that, which appears in the 1866 treaty, in their quest for justice, the idea of using such delineating identifications as Chickasaw Freedmen or Choctaw Freedmen, which is inclusive of the freedman status, is to ensure that their particular class of freedmen, in contradistinction to the American freedmen, are recognized as the proper beneficiaries of the specific remedy that they're seeking. This makes perfect sense. So what the author has expressed about the freedmen of the so-called 5 civilized tribes is that the names such as Choctaw, Chickasaw, Freeman, etc., functions as their ethnic names, while a term like freedmen descendants is used to denote their ancestry. And then the standalone word freedman remains the designation of a heritable official status. I think it's important also to point out that the term free slave is in fact an oxymoronic term designed to psychologically damage the freedmen by implying that regardless of manumission, they are slaves in perpetuity. The term free slave should be removed from the American lexicon because the proper and respectful term is freed men. Now, the first requisite question I asked was, were their ancestors who were held in bondage against their will actually members of the human family, or were they simply the Negro beast of burden that Europeans supposed they were? Well, the obvious answer is that they were not Negro beasts of burden, but were in fact members of the human family held in bondage as chattel against their will and forced into involuntary servitude. And for those of us who subscribe to the Judeo-Christian concept of creation, Genesis chapter 1, verses 26 through 27 is clear about who was created in the image and after the likeness of God when it states, and God said, let us make man in our image, after our likeness, and let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, over the fowl of the air, and over the cattle, and over all of the earth, and over every creeping thing that creeps upon the earth. I just want to quickly point out that what we know as cattle are beasts or animals that walk on all fours, and in certain instances used as beasts of burden. However, when it comes to the comparison of the inhabitants and the descendants of Africa to cattle, there is no history of walking on all fours as others were known to do. Now, Africa and its descendants have many problems, but walking on all fours is not one of them. Genesis continues. So God created man in his own image. In the image of God created he him, male and female created he them. So in this sense, man is inclusive of male and female, i.e., humanity. That leads right into the second question. Were the enslaved ancestors not men and women endowed by their creator with said unalienable rights, or were they subject to alienation of rights by colonial and state actors obsessed with oppression? To address the issue of said God-given unalienable rights, I go back to Genesis chapter 1, where verse 28 reads, and God blessed them and said unto them, be fruitful and multiply and replenish the earth and subdue it and have dominion over the fish of the sea, over the fowl of the air, and over every living thing that moves on the earth. Now, according to the Judeo-Christian text, God created man in his image and likeness and gave or blessed man with the right to freely live life and to multiply and to replenish the earth. Man was blessed with the right by God to subdue the earth and to reign over the animals of the planet. Man, again, means humanity, and the so-called Negro is a member of humanity. Now, in his dissent during the Dred Scott case, Justice Curtis cited the 1838 North Carolina Supreme Court case of State versus Manuel. In said case, Judge Gaston made this particular claim about the state of North Carolina, quote, all free persons born within the state are born citizens of the state. The Constitution extended the elective franchise to every free man who had arrived at the age of 21 and paid a public tax, and it is a matter of universal notoriety that under it, freed persons, without regard to color, claimed and exercised the franchise until it was taken from free men of color a few years since by our amended Constitution. So here we see some confirmation of Dr. King's words, where even in the southern state of North Carolina, all free men born there, regardless of color, were heir to the elective franchise until it was maliciously taken from those of African descent by way of amending that state's constitution, a violation of the principles enshrined in the founding declaration. So the next question is there any evidence to support the idea that the Declaration's principles of equality and liberty applied to black men as well as white men, as Dr. King stated. James Otis, an American lawyer, political activist, and politician, who an author writing for the Smithsonian called the colony's most galvanizing patriot, published in 1764 what was called The Rights of the British Colonies Asserted and Proved. In his publication, Otis asserted that blacks had inalienable rights, and he favored extending the freedoms of life, liberty, and property to them. The idea of racial equality also permeates his publication, in which he states, quote, "The colonists are by the law of nature free-born, as indeed all men are, white or black." Otis further explained about the civil and political rights of the British colonists by stating, quote, "that the colonists, black and white, born here, are free-born British subjects and entitled to all the essential civil rights of such is a truth not only manifest from the provincial charters, from the principles of the common law and the acts of parliament, but from the British Constitution, which was reestablished at the Revolution with a professed design to lecture the liberties of all the subjects to all generations," end quote. Again, this was published in 1764 before the Declaration of Independence by one of the colony's most influential members, who was himself influenced by and drew from the ideas of the 17th century political theorist John Locke. Y'all got to look up John Locke. It's important to point out, even though it's generally accepted that the founding declaration didn't apply to black men, the instrument doesn't mention race or color anywhere in its text. There is no special regard for white men, no exclusion of black men, nor does it mention slavery, in spite of the fact that some were slave owners and very much race conscious. The next was a two-part question. And I asked, was slavery legal, or was it an unconstitutional institution that was tolerated via a series of compromises between the original northern and southern states? And if it was unconstitutional, was slavery in contradiction to and in violation of the constitutional laws of England, the founding declaration, and a violation of the writ of habeas corpus? The truth is, slavery was an unconstitutional institution, which was tolerated, and there were compromises that stand as evidence of the government's toleration of it. For example, the Three-Fifths Compromise, the Fugitive Slave Act of 1793, the Missouri Compromise of 1820 and 21, the gag rule in Congress. When the gag rule was when the abolitionists began submitting petitions about ending slavery to Congress, pro-slavery representatives passed a quote-unquote gag rule that prevented these petitions from being discussed. Then you had the Compromise of 1850. You had the Kansas-Nebraska Act of 1854 and the Crittenden Compromise of 1860. And with regard to slavery's unconstitutionality, before Lysander Spooner's 1860 publication, called The Unconstitutionality of Slavery, Volume 1, a Philadelphian published a book in 1819 entitled Free Remarks of the Spirit of the Federal Constitution, the Practice of the Federal Government, and the Obligations of the Union respecting the exclusion of slavery from the territories and new states. Now, in this book, the author states, quote, "The utmost that can be said of the Constitution on this point is that it tolerates slavery in the old states. Slavery could find no shelter under the Constitution. The courts of justice, in the absence of any positive law, would be obliged to declare and protect the freedom of the Negro who should choose to withdraw from bondage, and refer them to the decision of his rights," end quote. The author then references the 1772 case of Somerset versus Stewart, in which an enslaved man won his freedom in court after his enslaver took him to England, and slavery was deemed inconsistent with the laws of England. The author states this, quote, The doctrine laid down by Lord Mansfield in the case of the Negro Somerset in England would be as applicable and ought to be as efficacious right here, end quote. What the author is making reference to, family, is the fact that slavery was a violation of the principle of habeas corpus. I'm going to read some very important points about the writ of habeas corpus from Spooner's Unconstitutionality of Slavery. When speaking of early Anglo arrivals, he stated, quote, when our ancestors came to this country, they brought with them the common law of England, including the writ of habeas corpus, the essential principle of which is to deny the right of property in man, the trial by jury, and the other great principles of liberty which prevail in England, and which have made it impossible that England's soil should be trod by the foot of a slave. These principles were incorporated into all the charters granted to the colonies. The general provisions of those charters were that the laws of the colonies should, quote, not be repugnant or contrary, but as nearly as circumstances would allow, conformable to the laws, statutes, and rights of our kingdom of England, end quote. Those charters were the fundamental constitutions of the colonies, with some immaterial exceptions up to the time of the Revolution. As much so as our national and state constitutions are now the fundamental laws of our governments. The authority of these charters during their continuance and the general authority of the common law prior to the Revolution have been recognized by the Supreme Court of the United States. No one of all these charters contained the least intimation that slavery had or could have any legal existence under them. Slavery was therefore as much unconstitutional in the colonies as it was in England. It was decided by the Court of King's Bench in England, Lord Mansfield being Chief Justice, before our Revolution. And while the English charters were the fundamental law of the colonies, that the principles of English liberty were so plainly incompatible with slavery that even if a slaveholder from another part of the world brought his slave into England, though only for a temporary purpose and with no intention of remaining, he nevertheless thereby gave the slave his liberty. Previous to this decision, the privilege of bringing slaves into England for temporary purposes and of carrying them away had been long tolerated. This decision was given in the year 1772. And for all I see, it was equally obligatory in this country as in England, and must have freed every slave in this country if the question had been raised here. But the slave did not know his rights and had no one to raise the question for him. The fact that slavery was tolerated in the colonies is no evidence of its legality. The writ of habeas corpus then necessarily denies the right of property in man. And the Constitution, by declaring without any discrimination of persons that the privilege of this writ shall not be suspended, that is, it shall not be denied to any human being, has declared under the Constitution, there can be no right of property in man. Now, Mr. Christian, one of Blackstone's editors, says that it is this writ that makes slavery impossible in England. It was on this writ that James Somerset was liberated. The writ, in fact, asserts as a great constitutional principle the natural right of personal liberty. And the privilege of the writ is not confined to citizens, but extends to all human beings. And it is probably the only absolute guarantee that our national constitution gives to foreigners and aliens, that they shall not on their arrival here be enslaved by those of our state governments that exhibit such propensities for enslaving their fellow men. And for this purpose, it's a perfect guarantee to people who come here from any part of the world. And if it be such a guarantee to foreigners and aliens, is it no guarantee to those born under the Constitution, especially when the Constitution makes no discrimination of persons? Now, there are two important points made here. One is that the writ of habeas corpus guaranteed that no individual had any right to property in man. And two, Lord Mansfield's 1772 ruling in Somerset is evidence of the acknowledgement that Somerset was in fact a man protected by law and not some individual's beast of burden or piece of property due to his ancestry and phenotype. Now, the next question I said needed to be answered is, what was Lincoln quoted as saying in regards to the freedmen and their involvement in the Civil War? Now, the National Park Service quotes President Lincoln as saying, without the military help of the black freedmen, the war against the South could not have been won. That these freedmen were honorable and noble men who took up the cause of justice to not only fight for their and their families' own liberation, but to also save the nation from the traitorous insurgent anarchists who were guilty of treason and trying to overthrow the United States government. The freedmen actually had to enforce the Constitution. The next question is, were the promises and commitments of Reconstruction made to the slave class or to the class of freedmen? We have to look first to the commission founded in 1863. The American Freedmen's Inquiry Commission was established during the Civil War after the enactment of the Emancipation Proclamation to determine the condition of formerly enslaved people. The commission was appointed in March of 1863 by the United States Secretary of War, Edwin McMaster Stanton, to, quote, inquire into the condition of the colored population emancipated by acts of Congress and the proclamations of the president, and to consider and report what measures are necessary to give practical effect to those acts and proclamations so as to place the colored people of the United States in a condition of self-support and self-defense, end quote. Now, due to the reports and recommendations of the American Freedmen's Inquiry Commission, on March 3rd, 1865, Congress passed an act to establish a Bureau for the Relief of Freedmen and Refugees, as well as an act to incorporate the Freedmen's Savings and Trust Company. In June of 2022, I tweeted some excerpts from the Congressional Globe of Representative Thaddeus Stevens' commentary during the debate surrounding the adoption of the 14th Amendment. Interestingly, 4 months later, Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson cited the same exact excerpt during the hearings regarding the Voting Rights Act in the case of Merrill versus Milligan. Justice Jackson obviously is aware of the significance and applicability of the freedmen terminology. I said Representative Thaddeus Stevens of Pennsylvania spoke specifically to the rights and protections of freedmen during the 1866 congressional debates for the 14th Amendment, as well as the constitutional support it provided for the legislative intent of the 1866 Civil Rights Act. See these excerpts, June 26, 2022. This is from the Congressional Globe. Whatever law allows the white man to testify in court shall allow the man of color to do the same. These are great advantages over the present codes, talking about the black codes. Now, different degrees of punishment are inflicted, not on account of the magnitude of the crime, but according to the color of the skin. Now, color disqualifies a man from testifying in courts or being tried in the same way as white men. I need not enumerate these partial and oppressive laws. This is the part she took. Unless the Constitution should restrain them, those states will all, I fear, keep up this discrimination and crush to death the hated freedmen. Some answer, your civil rights bill secures the same things. That is partly true. Talking about the Civil Rights Act of 1866, it does in part say the same thing that the 14th Amendment says again. But he's explaining why they needed to do that. Some answer, your civil rights bill secures the same things. That's partly true, but a law is repealable by a majority. And I need hardly say that the first time that the South, with their copperhead allies, obtained the command of Congress, it will be repealed. The veto of the president and their votes on the bill are conclusive evidence of that. So the fact of the matter is, what he was expressing was that you needed the 14th Amendment so that they would not be able to overturn the 1866 Civil Rights Act. Because had they left it the way that it was, another Congress would have come in and overturned that particular act. So what they did was they enshrined it in the 14th Amendment. So if you look at Section 1 of the 14th Amendment, you'll see it reads almost identical to Section 1 of the 1866 Civil Rights Act. What we've come to know as the reparations movement gets its first bill in the form of a pension bill for American freedmen from a man named Walter Raleigh Vaughan. The Freedmen's Pension Bill, as it may be properly called, was introduced in the House of Representatives June 24th, 1890. So the promises and the commitments of Reconstruction were made to the freedmen class, not to the slave class. It was during the Civil War that the government first acknowledged that a compelling interest exists in taking affirmative action for remedial purposes on behalf of the freedmen class was necessary. We can see that with the attempt at the land distribution via Special Field Order 15, issued on January 16, 1865. The 12th of January, Sherman and Stanton met with 20 leaders of the freedmen community of Savannah to discuss the question of emancipation. Their chosen leader and spokesman was Baptist minister named Garrison Frazier. He was about 67, who had been born in Granville, North Carolina, and was a slave until 1857. He had purchased his freedom and his wife's for $1,000 in gold and silver. Garrison Frazier made it clear on behalf of the freedmen that, quote, the way we can best take care of ourselves is to have land and to turn it and till it by our own labor, and we can soon maintain ourselves and have something to spare. We want to be placed on land until we are able to buy it and make it our own, end quote. A noble and honorable man and a member of the human family who stepped up to take his place among the affairs of men. I said all of this to say that even when using the constitutional laws of England and those of America, our families were and are human beings that no other people had the right to claim ownership over. Europeans, and particularly Anglo-American colonists, acted in violation of their own laws and principles. Our ancestors who were enslaved were nobody's beasts of burden or property, but were in fact men, women, and children, and day one citizens of this nation who were stripped of their rights. The fact is, the American freedmen are a special class of persons and members of the human family whose civil and political rights are to be respected as such. So that pretty much is the end of what it is that I wanted to present. I hope I did not go over the time limit that you guys had established, family, and y'all can let me know what we're doing.
No, that was excellent. First and foremost, everybody, if you can, hit the applaud emoji and let's give it up for our brother, Professor Ali, the Freeman adept student. He would understand that terminology. That breakdown was absolutely great, and I'm praying that those of you that are on this call, I know we deal with a lot of different distractions. I know social media is a major distraction. That's why I got my phone sitting to the side. I'm not touching it because I don't want to be distracted by anything. I want to pay attention to everything that is being said. And we have these conversations all the time. But, when you hear the information in succession in the way that Ali just broke it down, powerful. I think that everybody is able to understand what you just presented. And you made a case, brother, that hasn't been made in a long time in this country. We know that in 1899, the Brotherhood of Liberty, they published a book, Justice
That's
or Jurisprudence. And in that book, they're giving, in 1899, this group of brothers out of Baltimore, Maryland, are giving the same types of breakdowns that our brother Ali just gave in 1899. This goes to show, particularly for those of us who have never heard of the Brotherhood of Liberty or their book, Justice or Jurisprudence, that we are in fact on the right track. We're on the right track. So, but Ali, was there anything else that you wanted to add for, for our family that's listening in?
no, not really. I hope that it wasn't too much, and it that it was something that can be easily digested, because I really want people to walk away with that information. I think it's important, right? I was trying to stress, right? We use the term freedman very loose, right? But I think one of the main points that we're trying to express is that the use of the term freedman is, in my estimation, the United States government's acknowledgement of the manhood and the humanity of the people by calling them freed men and freed women. Before that, they were, like a lot of people would suggest, like, oh, they're 3/5 of, this is the way people were thinking. They're subhuman. They're that unfortunate race, as they've been referred to by
Justice
different people.
Tiny,
That, yeah.
Justice Tiny used that language, that unfortunate race.
Alexander Stevens in his cornerstone
Uh-huh.
speech calls us
Hmm.
that unfortunate race, and and they call the women negresses and niggerines, and, like, I don't know if y'all know about the niggerine, but nigress and niggerine are two terminologies they used for the women, and Negroes and Negras and niggers, and and Blackie and Darky and Sambo and Coon and Shine and Pickaninny, right? They use all of these different names, and Monkey, right? Um, all of that stuff. And so, by you know, these are derogatory terms that they gave to the slave class and the bottom caste in society. So when they start talking about the freed men, this is what I really wanted to really just stick the point to. It's like, yeah, freedmen, right? But the man part of it is very important, because they're acknowledging your humanity for the first time. And that's something that we need to hold them to. We don't need to let them revert back to calling us all of these other phony baloney names. We're not descendants of slaves. Those people, if you listen to what they were saying, those people were actually freeborn people that nobody had any right to. And they were being stripped and robbed of their humanity, and stripped and robbed of their natural rights, even in accordance with the laws of England. So that's really it.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. So let's get into my presentation. So let me share screen again. Thank you all for coming. This is the first Freedmen Workshop. This will be the first of many, the first of many, up until we do our first Freedmen Convention. The ancestors, family, like, I got goosebumps right now. If the ancestors were able to look into the future, they would see us. They would see us right now on this call, and they would be proud, and they would say, "You know what? I'm good. Yeah. Y'all do what y'all gotta do, because we can't beat y'all physically right now. Y'all do what y'all gotta do." But our children, our great grandchildren are coming, and they're gonna mess you all up for what y'all are trying to do to us. And that's what we're doing right now, family. So, I'm glad that you all are here, because I really want to get into this thing. Freedman is a legal status by Nyhiem Way.
So today, a benefit to descendants of slaves would not be race-based, correct? Kavanaugh said to Cameron Norris, a lawyer arguing for the end of race-based affirmative action. Norris seemed caught off guard. I think that's incorrect, Justice Kavanaugh, he said. Kavanaugh then noted that Norris had already acknowledged that the post-Civil War benefits that formerly enslaved people received from the federal government were not race-based. Those benefits were based on their status as having been enslaved, not their skin color. What was the status? Their status as having been enslaved, been, past tense. They're freedmen and freedwomen now.
Facts.
Freedmen and freedwomen now. So we have a new status in the United States of America because this country's European American citizenry who took on the label white decided that they were going to do something repugnant, not only to the Constitution of this country, but also repugnant to the laws that built this republic. Those being the laws of England and those being the laws of Rome. And this is what I'm going to get into today during my presentation. So I want to get into the legal definition of status. Black's Law Dictionary, first edition, 1891. This is important because in order to understand how the laws for freedmen were constructed, you have to understand the legal minds and you have to understand the legal definitions that went into crafting these particular laws. So I want to start with status, being that status is what my presentation is about. Freedman status, to be particular. Status. The status of a person is his legal position or condition. Thus, when we say that the status of a woman after a decree, nisi, for the dissolution of her marriage with her husband has been made, but before it has been made absolute, is that of a married woman, we mean that she has the same legal rights, liabilities, and disabilities as an ordinary married woman. The term is chiefly applied to persons under disability, but persons who have some peculiar condition which prevents the general law from applying to them in the same way as it does to ordinary persons. Is this not what we had to deal with in this country? While we were free in the North, in the South we were enslaved, and the laws appear to not apply to us the same exact way. And so this government, because it was built upon the foundation of the Roman Republic, sought to utilize the history of what the Roman Republic did with its freedmen and the rights that it bestowed upon them. And I'm going to break that down as we move forward. It says there are certain rights and duties with certain capacities and incapacities to take rights and incur duties by which persons as subjects of law are variously determined to certain classes. The rights, duties, capacities, or incapacities which determine a given person to any of these classes constitute a condition or status with which the person is invested. When you hear us harping on freedman status, there's a reason why. When we're saying that race-based legislation, the push for race-based remedies or race-based criterias are null and void, I want to paint a picture for you as to why. Let's go to the next slide. Because there's a lot that I have to say, but I'm going to try to get through this thing because I have a lot of slides. So, status. This is Black's Law, 5th edition. And I believe, and I think Ali could jump in and correct me on this. This is around 1972, I think, if I'm not mistaken, in the 1970s. The first definition I read from was from Black's Law, fifth edition. I mean,
79. Fifth
excuse me,
edition, 1979. Fifth edition.
1979. The first definition that I read from was from Black's Laws Dictionary, first edition, 1891. You can see on your screen that it is clearly different from what I previously read. Excuse me, y'all. I'm excited. I just got to be honest with y'all. I am excited. So if I get a little tongue-tied, forgive me. Status, standing, state, or condition. Standing. What is our standing in this society? What is our state or condition in this society? The next words read social position. What is our social position in this society? Status, the status of a people is very, very important.
I can answer that.
Sure, go ahead, brother.
Our standing, our state or condition or social position in society is that of a formerly enslaved people.
That's right. It's as simple as that. As simple as that. It says the legal relation of individual to rest of the community, the rights, duties, capacities, and incapacities which determine a person to a given class, right? We've seen some of this in the previous definition, but the difference is that they gave an example of a married woman who was seeking to dissolve her marriage. We call that divorce today. In that until that dissolution happens, she still has the what? Duties, rights, capacities, and incapacities as a wife, particularly during that time. You know, women had to go through their whole struggle and women's suffrage movement, et cetera, et cetera. We're not going to get into that. Which determine a person to a given class. I want you all to stick a pin in that, which determine a person to a given class. A legal personal relationship, not temporary in its nature, nor terminable at the mere will of the parties. This means that this isn't a status that can be terminated. When the question was asked of, what's her name, Ali, the lawyer.
It was a constitutional law professor who, one of the pretendians, I think, asked her about the freedman
Freedman
status
status.
and
Right?
whether or not it still exists for us. And she said no, because we were made citizens by the 14th Amendment,
That's
which is
right.
completely erroneous, right? But anyway,
That's
go
right.
ahead. I'll let you finish.
That's right. But that's all I needed. I can't think of it. It'll come to me. But this isn't a terminable status. Dr. Sandy Darity said that the freedmen then were no longer freedmen today. Even after we debunked that claim, he still made the tweet. Now, this isn't one of those, this is a workshop. And this is where we are relaying information. So I'm hoping nobody gets into any feelings. But he was wrong because he claimed that freedmen only pertained to those who were emancipated in 1865. We're going to debunk that claim in this workshop. And I know some of you have followed my Twitter wall and some of the Twitter spaces that we have done, and we show how we've debunked this claim. But we're going to get into a little more detail here. And it says, with which third persons in the state are concerned. And it cites a case, Holzer versus Deutsche Reichsbahn Gesellschaft, right? We know Deutsch is the basically the original name of Germany, the Deutsch. And there was a case where it spoke to the status of Jews in Germany. And if those contracts, how they were structured based on the status of Jews in Germany, were applicable in the United States. See, I'm not going to get that deep. I'll email you all the PowerPoint. Send me an email, Nyhiem@usadof.org, and I'll send you this, and you can look it up for yourselves. And so the United States of America had to make a determination based on contracts and how those contracts were done in Germany with people of a certain status. That's why it says with which third persons and the state are concerned. Go to the next slide. Black's Law Dictionary, second edition. Now, this has the same, this is the same exact definition as the first edition. There's a reason why I want to use 1910, because it's further removed from 1865. 1891, kind of still in that range, right? Because it's the 1800s. But now we're in 1910. And Black's Law Dictionary, second edition says, freedman in Roman law, one who was set free from a state of bondage, an emancipated slave. The word is used in the same sense in the United States, respecting Negroes who were formerly slaves. And so we see Negro as the racial identifier. But what about the status of those Negroes? It says formerly slave, meaning that they have a new status now. And the definition lets you know this. In Roman law, one who was set free from a state of bondage, our ancestors, an emancipated slave, our ancestors who were emancipated with the 13th Amendment in 1865 nationally, with an act of Congress that establishes the 13th Amendment to these United States of America. But also, notice here, there are court cases that are cited. Fairfield versus Lawson. You see us cite that all the time. And Davenport versus Caldwell. We're going to get into one of these cases a little later. I threw this in here because it was in the earlier law dictionary. And I don't know, can y'all still see my screen? Okay.
Yeah.
It says Wheeler. This is from the first edition. In Hindu law, the relation between a master or patron and his freedman, and the relation between two persons who had made a reciprocal testamentary contract. Why did I throw that in there? Because I wanted people to know that this is a part of international law. That freedman is not a term confined to the United States of America. Matter of fact, let me rephrase that. That freedman is not a status confined to the United States of America. The only confinement is the English usage of what this status relays in all of these, or how this status, is expressed in all of these different languages across the world. And so a Wheeler in Hindu law, the relation between a master or patron and his freedman, and the relation between two persons who have made a reciprocal testamentary contract, etc. Right? So I threw that in there to give an example. So now I want to go into the law of freedom and bondage in the United States. And this was authored by John Codman Hurd. These are references that we were citing 10, 11, 12, 13 years ago, fam. And this was published in 1858. Get into it. It says manumission, 1858. Manumission, that is the legal consequence of the master's act, and the condition of a libertinus or freed person is in the institutes ascribed to the jus gentium. During the earlier centuries of the Roman Empire, 3 conditions were recognized among the libertini or freedmen, all, however, inferior to that of ingenuus or freeborn. And I may be pronouncing some of these Roman words wrong, forgive me. But the descendants of a libertinus were not distinguished from other freeborn persons. Justinian not only abolished this distinction among the libertini, but also made all free persons, libertos, citizens of Rome, abolishing all legal difference between the status of the enfranchised libertini and the freeborn, ingenui. From the recital and the enactment, it appears that the first, if not the second, also of these changes was a return to the ancient usage of the republic. What we have now in the United States of America is a democratic republic, which means a representative republic where we elect individuals to sit in the seat of Congress to represent our positions as constituents and what we would like to see done in this country. It says the rule of the Roman imperial law as the exposition of universal jurisprudence received judicial recognition in the American colonies. This is important because when we're speaking about freedmen and we are invoking Rome, what we have in 1865 with our emancipation is rooted in the legal precedent that was set by Rome, the predecessors of the Europeans who start this particular form of government in the geographical boundaries that we call the United States of America today. Here's a source from 1922. Freedmen, a term which refers to that class of persons and their descendants who were emancipated during the war between the American states. Remember what that definition in the Black's Law 5th edition, when it spoke about certain classes having a particular status, and that status defining how someone has or defining a person's status or condition in the society that they live in. That class of persons, Ali earlier spoke to how the descendants of the 5 civilized tribes never used the terminology descendants of slaves or descendants of slavery. They strictly say descendants of freedmen. They also consider themselves a class of persons. And for those of you who heard Marilyn Van in Buffalo Space about a month and a half ago, maybe 2 months ago, speaking, you heard her speak of her people as a class of persons. We are no different, family. We have just been knocked over the head and been given amnesia about all of this. Liberty, libertini, Latin, in Roman law. This is coming out of the Black's Law Dictionary. 2nd edition, 1910. In Roman law, freedmen, there seems to have been some difference in the use of these two words, the former denoting the manumitted, liberty, slaves considered, libertini, considered in their relations with their former master, who was now called their patron. The latter term describing the status of the same persons in the general social economy of Rome. Remember the example I gave of the Hindu definition. It called the former master a patron. The United States of America did not use such law when it came to its emancipating. It said, no, you are freedmen and freed women. You need no patron. You need no patron. If your former quote unquote slave masters would like service from you, you then will have to, the former slave master, draw up contracts to pay these men and these women for their labor. So the United States of America modifies the Roman law because it recognizes, as Ali stated earlier, the humanity of the men and women who were being illegally held in slave labor camps in this country that they give a flowery name to, like plantation. From a book on the social standing of freedmen, as indicated in the Latin writers, preceded by a discussion of the use and meaning of the words libertas and libertinus, we read, during our Civil War, there was created in connection with the War Department of the United States government. See, let me pause. The sources that I'm using are drawing a correlation of how freedmen are viewed in United States law and how they were viewed in Roman law, which the United States of America uses with the modification that benefited us. We just didn't know. We didn't know this stuff then. We didn't know it then. Let me continue. The object of this bureau was to aid the freedmen of the southern states. At the time of organization of this bureau, there were Negroes in the southern states who were not ex-slaves, and yet they came under the protection of this bureau. You know, this answers the question that some professors, some that have legitimate concerns, some who are just mere trolls, ask about those persons who were freed before 1865. But this particular reference, this resource answers the question. At the time of the organization of this bureau, there were Negroes in the southern states who were not ex-slaves, and yet they came under the protection of this bureau. The stain of slavery was upon them, not just because they looked like those who were emancipated in 1865, but because they were the descendants of those who were still enslaved by the states for however long. Particularly in those southern states. It continues, there is in operation at the present time in this country a fund known as the John Slater Fund for the Education of Freedmen. It is well known, understand this, it is well known that this fund, even from its foundation, aided freed-born descendants of freedmen as well as freedmen themselves, meaning it did not just stop giving a benefit to those who were emancipated at the time, but it also gave benefits to their descendants, much like the charter of the Freedmen's Saving and Trust Bank. Same language, same understanding. It says the use of the word freedman in these two instances is a parallel to this use of libertinus among the Romans. You still bore that stain, if you will, of slavery. But the way the law, and I'm going to get into that into the next slide, the way the legislators crafted laws, it was done in a way to remove that stain, remove it. And this is what is going to be highlighted in this next piece. It says, from the passages quoted above, it is evident that libertinus must include men that were once slaves. We have also seen that there were places where the writers in the use of this word seem to have in mind the descendants of freedmen as well as manumissi. Manumissi meaning, for us especially, those who were directly emancipated. We must therefore attribute to the word a meaning that will cover both of these conditions. And so the meaning of the word freedman covers not only those who were directly emancipated, it also covers their descendants. And we've shown this already in the definition of freedman in Black's Law Dictionary. We've shown this in the legal corpuses that we find in 1922. Y'all can do the math to how long that is after 1865. So when people are saying that we are not the descendants of freedmen today, ask them the question, when did we stop being descendants of freedmen? And watch them fumble with the answer. And you can just smirk and walk away. It says this offers, however, no particular difficulty, right? It's easy. There were writers then that wrote on the condition of freed men, the manumissi and their descendants. And there are writers today who wrote on the same. It says this offers, however, no particular difficulty. On the other hand, it is the most natural meaning that the derivation of the word would indicate. We have seen above that its adjectival suffix gives the word the meaning of, quote, pertaining to, or, quote, belonging to the class of freedmen. This meaning very clearly fulfills both of the above requirements. And my bad, I thought I had the other screenshot up where it spoke about how Justinian changed those laws that were hurtful, if you will, deleterious to the freedmen at the time so that they could enjoy full citizenship, just as the 13th, 14th, 15th Amendment, the Civil Rights Act of 1866, and the Civil Rights Act of 1875 did before that last one, the 1875 Civil Rights Act was overturned. Where are we drawing this from? Where are we drawing the definitions from the legal corpus and from the law dictionaries from? A case in 1883, Fairfield versus Lawson, a case that I cited from the legal definition of freedmen a few slides back. Connecticut Supreme Court. It says the term freedman was one generally applied to the lately emancipated slaves and their descendants. People say, yeah, but this was a case about a will. Okay, it was. What does that mean? It doesn't matter what the case was about. What matters is how is freedman being defined? That's all that matters. How is freedman being defined? Nothing else for us even matters. And we know this because the legal dictionaries utilizes this definition several places. It says, the court further finds that the term freedman as used in the will refers to that class of persons in the United States who were emancipated from slavery during our late Civil War or by its results, and embraces also the descendants of such persons. Again, if they say that we are not freedmen today, ask them, when did we stop being freedmen? And then give them these references and ask them, how do you then explain this? How do you then explain this? And these are, I'm not going to get, I'm going to skip past some of this for the sake of time. Charles Sumner's speech, whom many of you have heard me bring up time and time again over the past couple of months. Those of you who have listened to our spaces, this is from 1864. His speech, A Bridge from Slavery to Freedom, which was turned into a book, the speech of Honorable Charles Sumner on the bill to establish a Bureau of Freedmen in the Senate of the United States, June 13th and 15th of 1864. Much more might be said on the whole subject. This is Charles Sumner, but I forbear. I have opened to consideration the two principal questions. If the Senate agreed with the committee, we know that they did, First, on the importance of keeping the superintendent of the freedmen and of lands in the same hands so as to avoid local conflict and discord. And secondly, in the importance of providing surely against any system of serfdom or a description to the soil, the bill of the committee must be adopted. For the sake of plainness, I ask your attention to the main features of the bill under the following head. 1, it provides exclusively for freedmen, meaning thereby such persons as were once slaves, without undertaking to embrace persons generally of African descent. Now, there can be some questions conjured up by what this means. Does Sumner mean people that may be migrating from the continent of Africa, or who have migrated from the continent of Africa at the time, maybe the West Indies, and during that time we started to see West Indians migrating to New York, I think well before the 1860s, in fact, well before the 1860s. Does it mean the people who were emancipated prior to 1865? Well, according to what we've just read, that term freedmen also covered those people. And we know because the Freedmen's Bureau that Sumner is arguing for in the Congress, he's making a case for what the freedmen can do. But once this bureau is established, it also assists those who were not affected by the emancipation of 1865, the Act, the 13th Amendment. Some questions may arise in that regard, but either way, we would be hard-pressed to find a descendant of freedmen today whose bloodlines go directly back to two persons who were emancipated before 1865. So either way, we are all covered, and that question is answered, and it's only asked by those who are trying to poke holes in what it is that's being presented. I will not read the rest of these, but again, I urge you all to go to the speech of the Honorable Charles Sumner on the bill to establish a Bureau of Freedmen. It's called The Bridge from Slavery to Freedom, so that you all can see, these points that he's creating as the main features of the bill. I'll move on to another point in the speech. It says, different subjects, as they become important, are committed to the care of special bureaus. I need only refer to patents, agriculture, public lands, pensions, and Indian affairs, each under the charge of a separate commissioner. Do we not have a Department of Agriculture today? Do we not have a Department of Public Lands today? We do. I can't think of the exact department, but the parks departments fall up under that federal
National Park Service.
The National Park Service. Thank you, Brother Ali. We definitely know that we have a Bureau of Indian Affairs today. So what happened to the freedmen? What happened to our Bureau? But this is Sumner before our Bureau. Let me continue. He says, each under the charge of a separate commissioner. Clearly, the time has come for a Bureau of Freedmen. And speaking of a Bureau of Freedmen, I mean a bureau which will be confined in its operations to the affairs of freedmen and not travel beyond this increasing class to embrace others. It may be of African descent.
Wait.
President,
Increasing class?
That's right. That's right. That's right.
The freedmen class increased?
That's right.
Ah.
This increasing class. And we have references that show that after our people are emancipated in 1865 by the 13th Amendment, that is how we are being referenced, that the freedmen is being referenced as an increasing class. We are closing all the doors to all of the doubters. We're closing them. Let me continue. It says, and the term freedmen describes sufficiently those who have once been slaves. Ali's presentation elucidated what is meant by those who have once been slaves. And it is this class, which we propose to help during that transition period from slavery to freedom. This is why we cannot, in good conscientiousness, use the term American descendants of slavery. This is not a knock. We may have our differences with that group, but this is not that. This is just the fact, because you are not honoring the new condition. You are honoring the old condition. These are conditions. To say that you are a descendant of a slave, and this is why Ali was utilizing the biblical narrative. He wasn't trying to be preachy. He was using the biblical narrative for a reason. To say that you are a descendant of slave means that the great God of the universe, when he was creating human beings, created us to be slaves. And we know that that is not the case. That slavery is a condition. It is a condition that is placed upon men by other men. It is not a natural state. It is not a natural condition. Go to the next slide. I'm going to start to wind this thing down. I hope I haven't been too long, but I wanted to really get into this. This is our first Freedmen workshop. We're going to have our sister Antonia and Saskia come on after this. I want to get into the importance of the recent affirmative action ruling, because you all seen the history of freedmen and how it was used in Rome, and how the United States copied Roman law with modifications that benefited us. I'm praying you all took notes in that regard. So let us get into this recent ruling of affirmative action. Justice Thomas concurring. In the wake of the Civil War, the country focused its attention on restoring the Union and establishing the legal status of newly freed slaves. Remember, I started this presentation off by reading to you all the definition of status in Black's Laws Dictionary, first edition, 1891. That was important to set the stage of this workshop. The Constitution was amended to abolish slavery and proclaim that all persons born in the United States are citizens entitled to the privileges or immunities of citizenship and the equal protection of the laws. And he goes on to speak of, because of that second founding. And I didn't get into that. I didn't add that into the screenshot. But there's a book by a man named Eric Foner, who specializes in this period, called The Second Founding. And this is what Clarence Thomas is giving reference to, that there was a set of amendments that was solely designed for us as freedmen, done in a way that the history of the world had never seen before, that gave us a great power. If the European American who held the seats in Congress, the House and the Senate, would do their jobs, and they failed after a while to do that, and the Supreme Court would do construction, which was redefining what these Reconstruction amendments were designed to do. But we, the descendants of our freedmen ancestors, have resurrected in this day and time, and we are here to set the record completely straight. Justice Thomas says, importantly, however, the acts apply to freedmen. He's speaking of the very acts that I was speaking of, and refugees, a formerly race-neutral category, not blacks writ large, meaning, as some said, not to embrace all people generally of African descent, which we have in this country today, which is why we cannot do race-based reparations. because the United States of America would recognize that it would then give benefits to a people that suffered not just the harms, but the stain of slavery that perpetuated the harm, because the people wanted us to remain as slaves. This is why we reject the term Negro. We reject the term Black. We reject the term colored, because these were labels and names given to slaves by slaveholders during a period of time in this country. And the fact that they want to recognize us by those labels is akin to what Ali said earlier when he said freed slave is an oxymoron. It's not freed slave. It is freed men and it is freed women. It says, as he continues, and because not all Blacks in the United States were former slaves, freedmen was a decidedly under-inclusive proxy for race. By legal definitions, under-inclusive proxy means it's what Justice Thomas said a sentence prior, a race-neutral category. I opened up this presentation with the conversation that Kavanaugh had with Cameron Norris, one of the attorneys in the affirmative action case. And what did Kavanaugh say about benefits going to those who were emancipated from slavery and their descendants? He said that it was not based on their race, but it was based on their status, not their race. So it says the government can plainly remedy a race-based injury that it has inflicted, though such remedies must be meant to further a colorblind government, not perpetuate race consciousness. In the way race-based government measures during the 1860s and 1870s to remedy state-enforced slavery were not inconsistent with the colorblind Constitution. If the benefits that Kavanaugh was speaking on was based on the status of the people, not their race, and the courts have clearly noted that the government has within its capacity the power to remedy a race-based injury that it inflicted, we then move ourselves closer to reparations than we've ever been at any time after Reconstruction. Any time after Reconstruction. What is the injury now? The wealth gap, poor schools, medical apartheid, police brutality, hate crimes against our people. We can run down a gamut, a litany of different things that this government has allowed. The housing crisis in this country, when Barack Obama took office, they preyed upon us with predatory lending. Who was hurt from that when Obama bailed out the banks? It was the freedmen. We've still not recovered until this day. Then COVID hit. We have the greatest case for reparations on every single front right now in front of us than we've ever had, family. And that's what we're in this fight for. We're not in this fight to push some name. We're not in this fight to do that. We don't care about that. We're in this fight to get reparative justice for our families so that our progeny can live in this country securely like everybody else. That's what we're in this fight for. Let's continue. To satisfy strict scrutiny, this is Justice Thomas, universities must be able to establish a compelling reason to racially discriminate, right? And this is what was recognized in the Grutter case. It says Grutter versus Bollinger. It says Grutter recognized only one interest sufficiently compelling to justify race-conscious admissions programs, the educational benefits of a diverse student body. Justice Thomas destroys this. He destroys this. And he says, expanding on this theme, Harvard and UNC have offered a grab bag of interests to justify their programs, spanning from training future leaders in the public and private sectors to enhancing appreciation, respect, and empathy, with references to, quote, better educating their students through diversity in between. The court today finds that each of these interests are too vague and immeasurable to suffice. And I agree, Thomas says. Even in Grutter, the court failed to clearly define the educational benefits of a diverse student body. It gives the citation. It says, thus, in the years since Grutter, I have sought to understand exactly how racial diversity yields educational benefits. With nearly 50 years to develop their arguments, neither Harvard nor UNC, two of the foremost research institutions in the world, nor any of their amici can explain that critical leap. Diversity for diversity's sake has not helped the freedmen at all, family. It has not helped the freedmen at all, which leads us into the study done. When diversity for diversity's sake is not enough, should Black immigrants receive the benefit of affirmative action at the detriment of Native Blacks? I'm going to read this and I'm going to end it. I told y'all I had a lot to share, and I'm hoping that everybody took notes, because we have laid out the case just in this workshop alone of how freedmen status can be utilized for our push for reparations at the local level and at the federal level. Now, the only thing we have to do is just simply work on getting the language correct. So let me read. The continued admission of large proportions of Black immigrants relative to Native Black goes against an important diversity rationale in Grutter versus Bollinger. Oh, there's so much I wanted to get into, family, and I knew for the sake of time that I couldn't. But this opening sentence that I have on the screen, I can do another 20 or 30 minutes on alone. It says a cornerstone of the diversity rationale in Grutter, which allowed the use of race-based preferences and higher education admissions policies, was to create an environment of diverse experiences that would help to dispel negative stereotypes held of certain minority groups. Black immigrants have now become an overrepresented group with Black populations at many colleges and universities, particularly at more selective institutions. This trend is significant because Black immigrants bring with them experiences and perspectives similar to those held by other immigrant groups as compared to Native Blacks, and more importantly, Black immigrants harbor views of Native Blacks that are similar to those held by the dominant American culture, including many of the negative stereotypes of Native Blacks and the Black subculture. In 2003, the Grutter Court stated an expectation that 25 years from the issuance of its opinion, affirmative action would no longer be necessary to further the diversity interest. A key issue with the court's expectation is whether, during this 25-year period, Native Blacks, and when this paper says Native Blacks, it means American freedmen, will continue to be heard with significant force at many colleges and universities, and now into the distant future. This note argues that extending race-based preferences to Black immigrants works against a fundamental rationale in Grutter. Extending race-based preferences to Black immigrants who overall have higher admissions metrics compared to Native Blacks leads to the admission of a disproportionate number of Black immigrants compared to Native Blacks, particularly at the most selective institutions. So we see that diversity for diversity's sake did not help us. It did not. And there's a whole breakdown that can be given to that, but because we have time constraints, we will not get into that. I'm going to read this and I'm going to wind it down. Overrepresentation of Black immigrants at institutions of higher education, same paper. The practice of selecting Black immigrants over Native Blacks who have roots in the United States is a sensitive issue within academic circles, particularly in the admissions process. In 2004, the New York Times reported on the large immigrant populations within the Black student bodies on the campuses of many elite colleges and universities. During a reunion of Harvard University's Black alumni, two prominent professors pointed out that of the roughly 530 members of Harvard's Black undergraduate population, Black immigrants comprised as much as 2/3. Out of 530 members of Harvard's Black undergraduate population, 2/3 of them were Black immigrants. This article shed light on the fact that although there are many native Black students who could perform well at top-tier institutions, many selective institutions have seen content to take higher-performing Black immigrants over native Blacks. What at the time appeared like an observation of two professors of one Black student body at one university, in actuality was indicative of a larger trend that has been occurring at many selective colleges and universities around the country over the past couple of decades. So we hold the position that the shutting down of affirmative action is for the benefit, the affirmative action, that helps and has helped not only Black immigrants, but every other group, has been shown by Brother Ibrahim with the Fearless Fund when he highlighted how that fund has a tier system. And in the top tier, grants were issued for $20,000. And in the second tier, grants were issued at $10,000. But at $20,000, many of the women that received these grants were Asian. They were Hindus, if you will, Indians, Pakistanis, etc. And the Black women that received these grants, like the college admissions, like the students of the colleges and universities, they were not of American freedmen stock. They were largely Black immigrants. So these funds were race-based, but they were not based on status. And this man that we have up on the screen, he's coming. And he has stopped and eliminated so many programs, not just with lawsuits. They are firing off letters. And the letters are threatening enough so that law firms and Fortune 500 companies all over the country are shutting down their programs. These are my last two slides. Notice where Black wealth is at on this graph. This is from a Bloomberg article, and I meant to put the source on there, so forgive me. Real median household income by race and ethnicity from the year 2000 to 2018. Look at Asians. $90,000 we find Asians peaking at. $87,194. I want you to think about what I said about that Fearless Fund. These people are finding ways to get into these programs to add more money into their pockets. Look at white folks since this time period, 70,642. What Bloom is saying is, well, if these other groups are getting this money, and although our wealth positionality is set, a new article has just come out and shown that white wealth in this country is basically a monopoly. Well, we want to dip our hands in that money too. And if we can't dip our hands in your Black Capital Venture Fund, then we want it shut down. And they are shutting them all down. We get to Hispanics. These people came well after we came, but they're on the third level at $51,450, although they keep adding more poor people who are crossing over this border into our country, whether legally or illegally. They are weighing down this number, and why they are at what appears to be the bottom. With immigration reforms the Hispanics would be up there with whites and Asians. And then you have the American freedmen at the very, very bottom. And what we are doing, because blackness has not been disaggregated, we're dragging on the Caribbean and African population, who, particularly Caribbeans in a city like Boston, is worth $13,000 according to the Color of Wealth report that was published a few years ago, as opposed to the American freedmen, who are only worth $8 in that same city. And this is my last slide. Key disparities in income and education among Asian American groups. This is strictly Asian Americans, family. This is strictly Asian Americans. But notice, Burmese. How many of you have ever met a person that said, I'm from Burma? I know I haven't. But their wealth positionality in this country is higher than ours, because 40K is the line at the bottom that I have circled, and Burmese are above that line. And our wealth positionality, as we see, is only at $41,692 as of 2018. We don't know what it is pre-COVID. Post-COVID. We don't know what it is. Look at the rest of the people. Native Hawaiians, 60,000. Nepalese, Tibet, all of these different Asian groups are between the 60,000 and the 80,000 mark. So how is it that the Fearless Fund is claiming that it's going to give monies to Black women, using the plight of Black women being marginalized in this country, and yet when you go to their website, many of their top tier grants have went to people who are already situated between this $60,000 and $140,000 wealth position in the United States of America. And that ends my presentation. I pray that it wasn't too long. I had a lot of slides, and I really wanted to get through it, and I wanted people to see and understand exactly what we're facing. I wanted people to know that there's a pathway toward reparations. There is a pathway toward reparations. So I'm going to turn it over to our good sister, member and board member, Sister Antonia Edwards and Sister Saskia, because these are activists that are on the ground in the New England area who are getting the work done. They're getting the work done. We don't have to guess. We don't have to just throw around a bunch of ideas that we put on paper. No, let's get the work done. Turn it over to our sister Antonia. I turn it over to our sister Saskia Van James. The floor is yours.
Good evening, everybody. And I really, again, appreciate the fact that everybody tuned in. This was really important to us. I'm going to let Saskia go first. She has made the major accomplishment of making an American Freedmen Committee in the city of Cambridge. And I think that we should give her flowers. So I'm going to let her go first, and then I'll go after her. Okay. You there, Saskia?
Yep, I'm here. So, hi, you guys. Thank you for joining in tonight. And this is like the presentation so far. I just want to say it's been wonderful. Really, really amazing, you guys. I'm going to end up sharing my screen so you guys can see. So this is published, you guys. You can Google it. You can put in American Freedmen Commission. This is like the paid legal notice. The city has to do this because it is law. And I'm just going to show you the screen. Like, this is the Cambridge Commission. So the American Freedmen Commission in Cambridge. And so it has to be at least 85% identifying as American Freedmen, and American Freedmen is defined. So we have definitions in here. We have it like this was converted, you guys. I'm going to show you another screen so you can see how much this was simplified. So this is, there's breadcrumbs here so that you can see, like, this started as a Truth and Reconciliation Policy Order, which is really what we wanted.
Mm-hmm.
And they don't usually do storytelling. So when I first presented this, a storytelling way of through law, when I first presented it, I argued back behind closed doors because I said that there's other cities, you guys, that don't understand all. They're not going to have someone to be able to give all of this presentation and clearly lay it out.
Mm-hmm.
I argued against, cutting it more and more down. But this is where we ended up, and it has in here so you can see like a task force was included in here because that's where we started from. And then the city manager and Councillor Zondervan, who is our Caribbean city councilor, they went and simplified it even more. And that's how we ended up to where it is now, where you have definitions, you have defined membership, and you have definition of terms. And there's going to be an executive director and then the purpose. And so just to, go through this real quick, it does clarify American freemen shall mean persons freed from chattel slavery within the United States and their descendants. It does not use race for defining them. And the membership is 3 years, and the chair shall rotate after each year. We didn't want to have power issues within the actual commission. We want to build a community of leaders and for different idea and just a democratic process of voices within our own community. We wanted to make sure that happens. And also members are paid a stipend. So I just want to say for you guys to know that in the city of Cambridge, our commissioners are paid $20,000 a year. So this wasn't something I had to argue for that to occur, because this is part of equity of no free labor within the city. So this has been argued previously, and this is new. Our city just started doing this, but this is something that's started since right before or right around COVID hit, that they just started doing this. And then, the executive director. And then the purpose is really, really simplified, but you can see to implement transitional justice for Cambridge residents, American freedmen. They will also investigate and report on any historic, systemic, and ongoing harms done to American freedmen by the federal, Massachusetts, and/or Cambridge governments, and to identify adequate, effective, and prompt reparations. So in here, one of the things that when I'm giving my presentation that I said to them that the commission, if we discover, and they've augmented it, in the final one, it's actually not here, but it's one of the verbal agreements that was agreed upon, that if in the research there's harm where it just says a group of residents in this area that identified Black were forced off of land. This is an example. If they're forced off of land and through our forensic accounting, for harm, we discover this, but then looking back, they're not actually American freedmen because Cambridge has such a diverse history. I have a family here that's Black. They've been here since 1900, but they're from Barbados. Their family's originally from Barbados. They're not actually American freedmen. So there's harm that we could discover for people who's been here a long time, and this is specific to here. So we said that we could acknowledge these harms and give it over to the city because the city needs to investigate a way of repair for harming other Black people. Essentially, American freemen don't have to take that on, but you can create space for other people who have been here and what it's going to take to repair those harms as it's being explored by American freedmen. And this is similar to how, the Freedmen's Bureau was set up. It's we're providing services to the Freeman community and then refugees. And so essentially that's what's going to happen the same way, is that we have to establish a successful municipal reparative justice model. And I really, really stress, you guys, reparative justice, because what's happening all across, what I'm witnessing across, which is why you don't see me on Twitter that much, and I'm going to talk just a little bit about that, but people are applying restorative justice instead of reparative justice. And reparative justice is actually recognized by the New England Higher Education Board. It's actually recognized and defined there. But reparative justice has its own framework. And what's really, really critical, and the difference between reparative justice and restorative justice, is that reparative justice, like reparations, requires a public participation process. You have to have a feedback system with the people who have been directly harmed. Like they have to name their harms, and then you have to develop pathways towards repair. So there's inclusive. So there's a feedback system that has to occur, a public participation process that has to occur for any sort of reparative programs to exist, in order for satisfaction to occur, right? So this is like all legal framework, and I'm really, really stressful because I see so much scamming. It's just grifting that's occurring. Like there's millions of dollars being put out towards reparations and nonprofits, and it really bothers me that we're just not seeing it go directly towards our community. Like everybody has their hand out, and for some reason it's not coming directly towards our community. So this bothered me so much, and they were taking so long, like my city was taking so long with this. I actually started up a nonprofit as an example, you guys, so that they had an example of what a nonprofit would look like. And for me, I stuck to Grow to Consumers, the organization, and I stuck to us because to the 40 acres claim, and that we have the right to grow our own food. So we have food sovereignty, and that way I'm pushing land sovereignty as part of our reparations. So the work is being done because one of the critiques that I have here within my community here in Cambridge and just Massachusetts in general, one of the critiques that I've encountered is that everybody's screaming reparations, but who's out here repairing the community? And when I heard that, I was like, oh, okay. All right, bet. Y'all want to say challenge? Bet. I'll get busy. I have no problem showing exactly what I want. What I want is some groceries, okay? Because the cost of food is no joke. You know what I'm saying? I should have my 40 acres. I should not be paying and be stressed out about organic fruits and vegetables, nor should anyone in my community, and I shouldn't be cut off from resources, and resources includes the time it takes to do land cultivation. And so these things bothered me, so I got busy. So I don't want to hear complaints from anybody within my community. I was just like, I'm shutting this down because I'm not only advocating for our sovereignty, but I'm also getting busy and helping us as a people practice repair, practice cultural repair. We have a way of growing our own food. There's certain foods that we like within our community. It doesn't make any sense to have our cabbage being shipped in from other countries. That doesn't make sense to me. Like we just need to own our own food. Like I'm really, really passionate about that. And it just so happens within my city right now, because of climate change and environmental justice, my advocacy is very timely because they care a lot about that. They're realizing how much harm there is through chemicals and land, and how there's actually this too is violating human rights, environmental racism, so they're trying to clean up land, and there's a lot of money coming in through that type of stuff. And they're trying to figure out diverse ways to include the communities that have been most impacted. So there's an interest, but you have to remember, you guys, like on a municipal level, I don't lead the presentation. I actually say in my presentation, on a municipal level, you have to realize that the actual number for reparations that's owed, like this number is so huge, it's impossible to do on a municipal level. So I want you to just take that off of the table. And I think really need for you guys as city councilors that when people are talking to you, for you to say, a check is not possible on a municipal level. It's not within our budget. I want you to be honest about this, because it's not it's going to be you'll be bankrupt. You don't have it. It's beyond you. Okay. That's a federal conversation. It's beyond you. And that opens the doorway so they're like, okay, well, if you're not asking to hit our budget, what are you asking for then? And that's where you're able to say, I want you to recognize us. I want you to recognize us through an American Freedmen Commission, so that our community organizers can actually learn, reparative justice. We can develop a municipal model of reparative justice with the support of the city, and that we're able to actually heal within our communities, in a manner, that we can work and develop policies. And just starting there, like that small language, you're essentially like, this is policy making. That's how laws get passed. This is lobbying. That's what lobbying is like, just present it really, really small, get them to acknowledge loss of sovereignty. There's no way getting around that. It is absolutely necessary, because you have to name a present harm. And that's the problem that a lot of other groups have, is like, you have to name a present harm that actually extends all the way back to the beginning. When we just say slavery, it's a past harm. And I actually listen to very, very conservative white folks. I listen to their arguments, because their arguments I know will play out in a conservative Supreme Court. And so when they say that happened, previously, it's not, something that's still upon you. It's like, okay, I'll listen to your argument, and I'll find, because you guys have multiple harms. Like there's multiple harms against my community. And so loss of sovereignty, is the undeniable one. And it's imperative that we acknowledge political status. Like we absolutely, there's just no way. Like $8 is what we're dealing with as American freedmen. And that really, having that number, that difference, $8 to $12,000, having that number, and then 247K to white folks, but having those numbers here really, really helped the city councilor to acknowledge that something's not right, that like we have to do something to support this community, because they're facing economic death. And this is not good for any of us in our community. So and I also just have, I'm in Cambridge, so that we're much more of a liberal town, where experimentation is like encouraged. And also we're at a time in the country where the country is really focusing on climate justice, and climate justice is human rights. And people are feeling fatigue over the call of racial justice, because the call of racial justice, it's literally, racial justice is social justice, you guys. It's just a branding. And I really hate to do this, because our ancestors in civil rights, was so important. I'm just going to read, I'm going to pass this over to you, Antonia, in a second. I just want to read a quote to you guys from James Baldwin. He was in an interview, in a civil rights interview. It's on YouTube. And the interviewer asked him, let's admit that it is extremely difficult when racial prejudices are around. And James responded, let's examine what racial prejudice means. After all, everyone is of one kind of race or another. We're not talking about racial prejudices. We're talking about structures of power which have the right and duty to tell other people who they are for very dubious reasons. After all, the only reason I had to be Black was to justify my slavery. That's a part of my inheritance, and a part of yours too. It has nothing to do with race. It's a way of avoiding history. That is just like such a profound quote. And then I had shared with Antonia, I had found on social media a South African man talking, and in his talk, this is recent, it just happened, caught him on film last year. He was talking in the streets, and he was saying, my people have lost their identity. They don't even know who they are. He said, we're at a point where the colored believes that he's a colored, even though this term has been forced upon my people, that history has been so distorted that people are confused. And this history was distorted first by the colonials, then the national government, and now the Democratic Party. And to hear somebody on a whole other continent say the exact same thing that American freedmen are saying here only shows you the consistency of white supremacy. Like it's consistent in its tactics, and it's consistent in its success. That as well too, because you're seeing the same harms coming out that we're saying. And so I think it's very, very important that we acknowledge we are whole human beings. And there were many tribes that we were. And so you have to acknowledge us simply as American freedmen as a result. So I'm able to explain, through history and that worked with the city councilors, the Freedmen's Bureau, the fact that that was already there, how it was defined, who it served, and just showing government links, like, here's a part of history, going through that. All of these things worked. And that's how we were able to get this. And the city is very, very excited. So many people called from across the country. that afterwards the city, like the city councilors, felt really, really affirmed, because this is very, very, radical, to do. We recognize it's the first one in the country, so they're paying close attention to our work. They really, really want a success story and to help Massachusetts, and hopefully to that the work that they're supporting can support a federal Freedmen's Bureau. Like I tell them, you guys, the work that we're doing here is setting off, like, it. I want us to go viral. I want you guys, this passing, for everybody to take this and to be able to say, if Cambridge does it, why can't we do it here? Like, that was the whole point of doing this, so that you guys had something very simple where you can just take the link and email your city councilors and say, I want to speak to you. I want you to introduce this ordinance. I want an American Freedmen Commission in our town. If American Freedmen Commissions are popping up all over the town, and we're all over the states across the country, and we're all saying we want a state office of Freedmen Affairs and a Freedmen's Bureau, they have no choice but to acknowledge us. Why? Because we're showing that we're organized, right? Two, once you start having the commissions, you're going to have reparatory justice programs developed. That means services in the community. We already know with our Black Panthers, when we have something, they always take over it. So we just have to get busy. That's just it. We have to service our community, because they're going to get jealous and they're going to say, you know what? We're going to create a Freedmen's Bureau. But if we're just screaming for it and not actually doing the work, then that doesn't work, right? Like that, faith without works is dead. You have to get out here. You have to get busy. You have to show them what services are missing to your community. So I really just want to, stress those things. And those services are different. Antonia services by providing education. Some of us are out here providing education on it. So there's different types of education. There's heritage preservation education. I'm focusing on gardening education, and land education. I don't want to do, what everybody else is doing. I'm like, I want to, service in this way. I think there's so many ways that we can think about, and ways that bring us joy. Like it should be a joy for us to be in communion with one another. This shouldn't be, I feel like this should be a joyful movement. Joy is the resistance. That's what our people are calling for. We have to think about this in a healthy manner, not in a marching and all of that. No, we should be partying and enjoying one another, because it's the coming together of the American Freedmen community. And that's historically how we've always been. So I don't want to see us in any other way than how we are, and I think that's where we're able to really get things done. So I'll stop here, and Anthony, I'll let you go, because I know we were waiting for questions. Just tell me what page what do you want me to pull up, and I'll.
Jay, thank you, Saskia. Let's start from the beginning.
Hold on,
Connecticut.
sis. Let me
Yes, thank
give
you.
you a proper introduction. We are bringing to this up on this portion of the workshop. Excuse me, I got papers falling all over the place. Our sister Antonia, who co-founded Solidarity out in the New England area. The sister has done phenomenal work in that area, and I've looked at many of the newspaper articles, because we had to do research for the Boston RFP, and I was able to see, like with my own eyes. I've seen some things, but I was able to see that this sister she's about her work and she's about her people. So, I just wanted to give you a more proper introduction, as opposed to you jumping in, and going in and getting into your 1-2 thing, So shout out to you, shout out to Brother Jonathan, shout out to Sister Saskia, excellent demonstration as well. And shout out to all the freedmen in New England. Okay, Sister Saskia, please check the chat as well. Some people have some questions for you. We're building right now, family. We are connecting.
Yeah.
Our job at United Sons and Daughters of Freedmen is to make sure that the language is tight. Everybody can, the pot of ideas is open for everybody. Our main job is to make sure that what we're doing can pass strict scrutiny. We don't want
Exactly.
anything to fail, period. So
Oh,
please, Sister
Exactly.
Antonia, go in.
Thank you.
Mhm.
So I seen the question in the chat, and that's what me and Saskia are gonna do right now. She has all the links, and so we're gonna go through them one by one so people understand how we got to the place we're at right now. So this started off with me, Jonathan, and James in Connecticut. We wrote a proposal back in 2018. We presented it in 2019, and that's the first proposal for Connecticut, if I do see Saskia. And so
yes.
basically, what we did was we had a proposal. It was trial and error. We presented it to the Black and Puerto Rican caucus. We used a state rep who said he was into it, but he wasn't. And so our bill died. And so after COVID, we went back to the lab, we revamped it. And so we then presented it again after we revamped. This is the final copy of it, the revamped copy, and basically we presented it to Senator Anwar. Now, Senator Anwar is a Pakistani, I think he's Arab Pakistani. The brothers have had a chance to speak with him. He is the most dedicated person to our plight. I worked on 3 bills with him in Connecticut, and they all went through. Racism as a public health crisis, desegregate Connecticut, and also an act for children's mental health with a concentration on Black kids in the underserved community. And so all 3 of those bills passed. So he calls me, he texts me, he emails me anytime he has any questions with regards to quote unquote Black people. And he really values our opinion. So we submitted this bill to him. We're still talking back and forth with him with regards to American freedmen language. In Connecticut, there's a high population of Black immigrants. This man has received death threats. Nobody likes him because he sticks up for us. So it's a coaxing situation. And so I want to do whatever makes him feel comfortable. But I said in all meetings that I am with him, that I stand behind him 1,000% in mixed with conversations with white people, Black immigrants, or whatever. Anytime somebody from another foreign country stands up for our people and fights for our people and our own Black senators and state reps don't, I stand beside them 1,000%. So he has my dedication. He emails me on a Saturday, texts me on a Saturday, and Jonathan and James and I have had good rapport with him. So the Connecticut bill is 818, and we're still working on his comfortability and adding American freedmen. So this is where it started with us writing a proposal, getting into legislation. So the bulk of my legislation work comes from Connecticut, and all it is attending meetings from different various subjects, whether it be children's mental health, whether it be racism as a public health crisis, whether it be funds not coming to the underserved communities. You have to be able to go to different meetings and hear and listen to what's going on. And then you attend the legislation meetings. And then you build a rapport and network with the state reps, the senators, and especially their assistants. If you can get through to their assistants, then you're in the House. So basically, I spent several years doing that since 2017, I think. So I took that practice, and when I came to Boston last year to help take care of my mom, the bill for Boston's reparation was already in place. However, when I noted it, it said Black slaves, African enslaved. So me, Jonathan James, and Saskia, and another young lady decided to do a petition, and also NDC, New Democracy Coalition, decided to do a petition to the mayor and have her change the verbiage in it so that it read American freedmen, those who just ended descendants from chattel slavery. So what we got was the final ordinance that was voted on December 14th, 2022. And although it says African slaves up there somewhere, the bottom line is we at the bottom, I think it is Saskia, it says great knowledge in those who descend from slavery in the US. And that's all I wanted. So what I want to say to people is I see a lot of people being very critical sometimes online and in their conversation. You may not get exactly the verbiage exactly the way that you want, but as long as you get 90 or 80% of what you want in this legislation, you can always work on it. And I think that sometimes people miss the fact that this is just to establish the commission or the task force. Once you get into the task force or the commission, you can change anything you want to. So I think a lot of people are really critical or standoffish and not getting this stuff done because they wanted to read exactly the way that they wanted to read. And so Boston is a prime example of how this bill ordinance was already in motion from January or February of 22. I came in July, didn't like what I seen, and I tossed my hat in the ring. Me, Saskia, Aziza, NBC. We did press conferences. We did an actual petition, and they listened. So as a result of them listening, we now have the ordinance. You can go to the ordinance. That's the final ordinance at the bottom, Saskia, where it says that where's it at? Membership, membership. At the bottom, it says, go back up a little bit. The last paragraph of the last page, membership, number A, letter A rather. Go up. Right here. It says that you have to have great knowledge in those black, does it say black? Black descent from slavery in the US. And that was really important to me to segregate all Black Lives Matter. So Boston is 24% Black, high numbers of Black immigrants. We have other immigrant communities who now are saying that they're Black, especially Afro-Latinas. But I think that when you speak reparations on a municipal level or even on a federal level, it's an all Black Lives Matter situation. And so for me, it's all about my ancestors. I mean, I grew up, my grandmother was a freedom fighter, and so I know my history, and I'm 3 generations removed from slavery. So I want this really to be about paying homage to the ancestors. So that's what I advocate for. And when I tell people my story or I tell people my lived experience, they can't do anything else but listen. So as long as I had that verbiage in it, I was happy because it was the witching hour. So then we move on to the RFP. The RFP is a request for proposal, and that means that the city of Boston is the solicitors. They're looking for people who are the bidders that can bid on research consultants. And so basically in that, it had American freedmen and freedwomen and their descendants. So I'm like, wow, American freedmen is ringing bells. And that again made me feel like we accomplished something. So I'm going to go back just to make sure it's clear. The first piece is to attend meetings. You have to get in the community. You have to attend meetings on what's going on in the community. You have to listen or either go to meetings with your city council people, find out what's going on in your community that's of an adverse effect to you as an American freedman. And so then from there, you build and you network with state reps, senators, and also make sure that you're in contact with their assistant. So for instance, anytime we go around, we get cards. These are all their cards. There's much more. This is in Boston from last week. So you make sure that you present yourself. It's very okay for you to go into the State House on any given day and present yourself to their office and say, hey, my name's Antonia Edwards. I'm here for bill number 3921. Is the state rep available or the senator available? They'll say no. Okay, I just want to see if I can set up an appointment with them, or can you please give them this documentation? I want to speak with them with regards to this bill. And so you exchange information. They may tell you to send an email. They may tell you to, you know what I'm saying, they'll get back to you, whatever, but that's your first point of contact. Once you present yourself, once you build that rapport with the assistant or the rep, they always know who you are. And I'm just going to say this, people, in Connecticut and Massachusetts, they're waiting for us to come talk to them. They say this. They don't understand why we're not more present in presenting ourselves. I've had that said in Connecticut. In Connecticut, there's state reps and there's senators say, Antonia, we want to fight for Black people, but they're not saying anything. They don't come to us. They don't talk to us. So we're doing ourselves a major disservice by not making ourselves available. Okay, so that's the first step. The second step is to sit down and write everything out that you want, things that you're concerned of. So that's going to be your draft to a proposal. Once you have everything written out, then you're going to segregate it like you do a term paper in high school or either college by sections. And so the next piece would be the proposal that Saskia showed you. Our proposal from top to beginning has a title, has a glossary, has a table of context, and it's written out so it's all spelled out so you know exactly what we're saying. And we also always give credit to those who assisted, even if it's a conversation, even if it was listening, even anybody who helped build that proposal. Even if we never talk to them again, we always pay homage to them because that person can then use that for their future reference as well too. And that's just something we're big on at Solidarity. So this bill right here is 3921. That's the state bill. So we took the Connecticut bill and we linked it to Massachusetts. So Saskia and I and a group of people sat down and we went line by line and changed this bill to match Massachusetts. So Saskia and I spent hours and hours and hours on the phone. We did seek the assistant of Mr. Arthur Ward in Chicago, and also Nyhiem Ali. We talked to them a great deal about it, and we made sure that everything said exactly the way it was going to say. Because now this state bill says this is an American Freedmen state bill. And so the person who was asking us to work with us is American Freedmen. It's Brandy Fluker Oakley. She is she's from an HBCU. I do believe she's a D9. I'm not quite sure. I personally have never spoken to her, but we were connected to her through another person. So we had to trust the fact that the information was being relayed. Now that's another thing too. In this game, people are very, very tight-lipped and very selfish about lending their resources. And don't ask me why, because I'm not like that. So for instance, sometimes you have to gut instinct, put something together, collaborate with somebody, use their connection to get something to go through. So that's what we had to do with this particular bill. But the person who actually wrote the bill is Fluker Oakley, sent messages through this person to us for clarification. And when we needed clarification, we had to call Nyhiem and Ali. And so constitutionally, what should it say? Da 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 da. So we fine-tuned it. So this bill was up for vote to move forward in 2024 on last Tuesday. And so basically, there's another bill that's just like it, but it's more of an all Black Lives Matter bill. It's 1053. So this is Fluker Oakley. We want to pay homage to her. And so another thing too, I want to say, a lot of people think that a bill is supposed to be 15 pages. A bill that's being submitted could be one sentence, one paragraph, two paragraphs. It's not going to look like the proposal. The proposal is what substantiates the person being able to write the bill. So you want to put your best foot forward in the proposal. Once you have the proposal, because even Senator Armour, he wrote a bill 818 and it's only a paragraph. It does not matter what the bill looks like as far as length, because they send it to a political analyst, and the political analyst pulls out what the senator or the state rep gives them, and they make it condensed as much as possible. So I've heard a lot of people like, oh, well, where's all this at? Well, why don't you put this in it? That's not our writing. That's not our proposal. That is the actual senator or the state rep submitting it to the political analyst before it becomes a bill. So it goes from us proposal, state rep or senator, it goes to the political analyst, they condense it or they manipulate it, and then they write a bill. And then they give the bill number back to the state rep or the senator, and then we then can see it online like you see it here. So I just want to make sure that that's clear. So sometimes we don't have control over the way that what bill looks in the system, but that's why I'm showing you guys our proposals. Our proposals are in depth. I mean, in depth. I'm saying we wouldn't even present it if that's not the case. So let me just give you a good example. So this bill right here for Massachusetts, if we use something from somebody like Saskia just highlighted the 12 areas of harm, that's something that I always talk about and speak to. That came from the California Task Force. At the bottom, I will put the California Task Force. If we use a statement from Dr. Darity, we will put Dr. Darity. You know what I'm saying? We'll give notes to them. Make sure you give credence to whoever you use in your proposal. It's really critical that you do that, because you may need to lend that person eventually for testimony or for credibility in order for them to take you serious. So, okay. So last week on Tuesday, Monday was Saskia Cambridge voting for her bill, unanimous 9-9. Let's give a shout out to Saskia. She worked really hard on this and she got it. So I had the privilege of being there for the first hearing in September, and then this in person for the final vote. And it really broke my heart to know that there was a room full of people. And there's one lady on the prompt, she was African American, or she was American Freedman. But the gentleman that she's talking about, I can't say his name, he worked lockstep with her to make sure this went through. And it just pains us sometimes when we're on the ground that we have more help from other people of other races than we have our own. And I'm just being perfectly honest with you. So I could see his genuineness. As a matter of fact, we took a picture afterwards. I had the banner from American Freedmen. He wanted to take a picture with it, right, Saskia?
Mm-hmm.
It was he got up from his seat. He came over to Saskia. He gave her a big hug after it was voted in. He was really genuine. I mean, really genuine. Okay, so we're going to go back to our bill, which is 3921. On Tuesday, ironically, simultaneously, our Bill 3921 was being presented as well as 1053. 1053 is by Miranda, who is a state rep, who is Cape Verdean, who has in her bill African American slash U.S. freedmen. And so that's problematic in the sense of there's no race-based, initiatives anymore. And we've been trying to explain that to her, or we thought that that would be something that saying she would be interested in. Now, when I open up this bill, I bring it into people's attention. This bill was copied and pasted from California. It still has California in it, right?
Yeah.
And then not only that, it took the woman who was working with us, who has a connection that we use for our bill, copied and pasted a block of our piece from our proposal and gave it to them. So this bill is raggedy. And when I say by raggedy, is that to date, nobody's picked up on the fact that California is still in this bill. So that means that they're not reading it. So what I want to clarify to everybody, because it was something that was brought to my attention, that that this bill may take over. This bill can't take over. This bill, first of all, was highly supported along with our bill. So, for instance, they were walking around with stickers on that said, "Reparations now, vote HR H3921 in addition to 1053." And so when people were testifying, and I gave the clip to the brothers and everybody else, they were voting on both bills. So both bills received the same amount of traction. The only thing is with this bill, she has African American slash U.S. freedmen. And I don't know where she got U.S. freedmen from, because we don't call ourselves U.S. freedmen. The only people that do are the U.S. Freedmen Project in New York. And I know she didn't talk to them. So they think that they're gonna get it to go through by one means or another, maybe. I don't know. But the bill is bogus because it has California in it. And it also took a chunk out of our proposal and put it in there. So when I asked one of the state reps assistant, I said, why are there two reparation bills at the same time? And she did say that basically they like to see both sides agreeing to something versus being an adversary for. So she's saying, had our bill go up and then the Senate side, which is the 1053, wasn't in agreement to it, then that would be more of a problem. So at least they're saying we both want a bill, but we have to clarify the verbiage. So the next day, which was Wednesday, Saskia and I got up early in the morning. We went to each legislator's office, and it's okay to do that after you testify. And so you can reintroduce yourself. You can say, hey, like I did. My testimony on writing is totally different from what I said when I was there. And because I watched the room. What you do when you go to the meeting, you gotta watch the room. You gotta watch everybody's demeanor, watch what they say, and so depending on what they say, it may change what you say. And so because every single person talked about all the harms, I didn't need to inundate them with the harms anymore. That's when I threw in the legal aspect of it. And I don't know if you got to see when I was speaking, Senator Eldridge, who was the chair, and his co-chair, it's like, wow, that was very interesting, very educational. So you listen to what they say and their feedback on what you said. And they said something similar to that when Saskia testified. So for me, I wanted to represent myself to them the next day and say, hey, I just want to make sure that you understood what I was saying. Because it was really rushy at that point, because I think I went on at 5:30. This was supposed to end at 5. You want to make sure that it's clear what you were testifying for. So not only did I send them an email after I got their business card, I asked to speak to them. So with the Christmas holidays coming up, it's very possible that they may not meet before Christmas, but you presented yourself in person, plus you sent the email. So at least they have you in mind. So to be perfectly honest with you, it's all about being on the ground. You got to be there. You got to be at different community meetings, different legislation meetings. You have to network. You have to make yourself, known. You have to talk to different people. And another thing I'm going to say that a lot of people get confused: you don't have to team up with your state rep or your senator or anybody that works in your particular area. You may find a state rep or a senator that agrees with you, like Senator Armour in Connecticut. Senator Armour was not my rep. He just believes in what I believe in, and you can always team up with him. So you don't have to definitely stay confined to where you live at. I'm going to give you a good example. Miranda is in my community. I don't agree with her bill. So Oakley is in another community. So I'm going to go with who is closely aligned to what I believe in and who will take me serious. So sometimes it's called shopping. You shop out people to see what they believe, what they feel, and who will be more interested in taking on your proposal to submit it. So I wouldn't feel confined to just dealing with your rep. So if you go to your rep and they're like, oh, no, I don't want to do this right now, don't feel no way. Find somebody else who does. And that's what we've done. So I hope that I have answered and shown you the different steps that we went through to get to where we're at. And I hope that I've also explained to you the hiccups. I mean, the hiccups are you have to be in tune. You have to network. You can't be a shy person. You have to make yourself known. Like me and Saskia in Boston, we went around to every city council person right before the bill got voted on for the Boston reparation bill. We sat down and educated them before the vote. We just pulled up. This bill right here, 3921, the day after the hearing, we went and we made ourselves known and we sent emails out to everybody. So it's just a matter of being involved. And if you guys need any of our resources as a template, you can always email us or email Nyhiem or whatever, and we'll try to figure out what we put together to do so. I don't have a problem submitting my proposal for Connecticut, and if everybody is agreeing with the one for Massachusetts, you don't have to use it word by word, line by line, but this is what's been successful for us. And so if you want to use it as a template and then create your own proposal to submit, I think that's great. Another thing I want to say to people, because a lot of people don't know the legislative calendar. So they're off during the summer. So you can have a short session or a long session. It all depends on the alternate year. From July through December, they're free. That's the best time for you to get in to get your proposal in, because in January, that always starts a legislative session. And if you want to be heard or you want your proposal to be recognized, you have from July to December to do that. And I would not wait to the last minute. So that's your free time to get your bargaining chips in, to meet with people and stop shopping or lobbying to make yourself known. I'm going to put my email into the chat for you guys. And I think at this point, we're going to just have an open discussion for questions, because I know that the workshop has mentioned a lot of information, but we wanted to do this to give you guys the honest, truth experience of putting stuff together, because we want to share this with people. We've been successful, and we think that the only way we'll be even more successful is to share the information with people so that they can duplicate it and learn from any mistakes that we made, and also learn from our success. So I'm going to put it back to Nyhiem, and let's have a Q&A. And while he does that, I'm going to put my email in the chat.
I just want to share, thank you, Antonia. I just want to share, you guys, we have got to get off of Twitter. I hope I sound like Eric Mays. We have got to get off of Twitter. We have got to get off of Twitter, you guys. Like, every single time you're about to even open that app, go send an email. Go send an email to your city councilor. You should, before you tweet, send an email. If you feel like you've emailed too much, then you can't tweet. Like, practice discipline for yourself. You know, it's an addiction. I know, like that like button or just to vent or see what's going on and being nosy. No, commit to silence. Take an oath. Take an oath of action. Commit to silence. Take an oath of silence. Be disciplined. You know,
hey sis, every time I every time I say I'm deactivating my page, I get 1,000 messages. People saying, no, don't. I know. Every single time, but I get what you mean. I get what you mean.
Up on there, you wouldn't even know I'm there. Look at that. Look at that. Because those people are distracting you. I need you here, you guys. I need you here in rooms like this, and I need you emailing your city councilors. The work isn't done on Twitter. The work is done in real life. You know, like we have to stay connected in real life. You know, we have to know each other's things. We have to build with one another. Yes, Antonia.
Can I say something, please? So a good example is like, for instance, especially when you have a last minute call to action. So Saskia and I did not know that the Massachusetts bill was being voted on until the last minute, like Friday night. We had to hurry up and notify everybody. We had to come up with our own proposal. We had to deal with Cambridge first, and then we had to deal with Massachusetts. We didn't want to confuse people, but we were expecting every single person on Twitter to send an email, and that was the easiest thing to do. I created a template. Nyhiem created a template, and all we were asking people to do is just to send it in. And so that's the smallest thing you can do when you see somebody have a call to action, whether it be Massachusetts, New York, whatever. that means a lot, because it doesn't matter where the email comes from. It's your support in the actual project. And so I just want to let people know that anybody can send an email if they agree to something from any state, but the people who are on the ground who are doing the work, we appreciate that more. And if you look at the hearings, we're not really in the hearings like that. Like, we don't show up like that. Like, when we came into the room, Saskia and I, there may have been 10 Black people in the beginning, Saskia. And then
Maybe.
people started disappearing as it went on because they thought it took too long. And so that's another thing too. When you have a hearing, you don't know when it's going to end. It's no different from a criminal case or whatever. You when you're called, you're called. A lot of people don't have the patience. A lot of people were disappearing, and I'm like, this is only 2 o'clock. It's only 3 o'clock. I mean, they were disappearing. So
It
those
was a
people didn't get to
5-hour
testify.
thing. Yeah, we had to block off
Right?
5 hours from 1 to 5. You
You
guys.
have to at least 4 hours if you're going to go in
So let me
person. But you can
say this.
always.
Let me say this
Mhm.
too to those who would organize and go sit at the hearings. Now you have information, and you can say,
Right.
"Look, y'all know this thing might be about 5 hours, so
Right.
prepare yourselves. If you can't make it,
Right.
then it might be better if you don't come, as opposed to coming and then disappear. I don't know, however y'all want to work that out,
Yeah.
but
Right.
but I think that people should prepare themselves to be at these hearings for those hours."
Yeah. You're absolutely right. For me, what I noticed, and this is again like my own impression, was no matter where you go, whether it be criminal, civil case, whatever, so forth and so on, you're going to be there for a while. But when something this important about reparations, let me just tell you guys, this is a one-shot deal. If we don't get this stuff right now, they're not going to take us serious again. They're not going to hear this another 3 or 4 years. They're not going to do this again. If we don't get it together now, I mean, we have the attention of everybody, and we have a lot of non-Black or non-freedmen people who are willing to work with us. We have a lot of allies from the other side. So to me, it's a waste of people's time and energy for us to not present ourselves. And it doesn't have to be in person, but the email, you know what I'm saying, or the Zoom or whatever should be appropriate for people who can't make it in person. And I think somebody said on Twitter they wouldn't have known without Twitter. Yeah, it's okay to advertise on Twitter, but what I see is we're trying to tell people to show up, and then there's long dialogues after that about the same thing we're talking about, but the emails aren't being sent or the Zoom's not being there. And I want to say this, Eric, a lot of people supported us. We want to thank you. Anybody who sent the email, thank you so much. But it could have been a lot of more. You know what I'm saying? That's what I'm saying. And so when I post something and I'm like, okay, people, this is the details, da, 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 and then there's no reaction, and then there's all these dialogues after it means that you're ignoring it, kind of, sort of. And I don't think people understand that it's so important for us to support each other, because I know we support everybody. If somebody tells me they have a call to action, I'm there. So that's what we just noticed in the Massachusetts bill. You know, that people just that were there had left. And if you look at the video, like the seats got emptier and emptier and emptier. These people look at that. They look at that like, oh wow, so where are all the people at if they truly believe in it? And we as American freedmen, we already have our people who are supportive up close and personal, whatever. But it just really needs to be tighter. And I'm just being honest with you. I think Saskia can agree with that, because Saskia did her whole presentation in a courtroom in Cambridge the first time by herself, and we were on by Zoom. There was nobody there to support her, and that happens to me as well too. So the second time we did on Monday, it was me and Saskia and a white lady who testified on our behalf. So my question is,
You got.
where are we at? I mean,
I
I'm sorry.
started a reparatory club because
Right,
nobody knew.
exactly,
We're dealing with misinformation, right? Like misinformation, like
exactly.
reparations is being sold as a check, a check, a check. So I have to
Hmm.
create a space, right? Like I have
Right.
to create a space for public education. So I held a space at the
Hmm.
Democracy Center, and
Hmm.
perfect place for this. And it was a
Right.
reparationist club. Become a
Right.
reparationist. What does this mean to be a reparationist? It's a
Yes.
wonderful, wonderful place for anybody of any background to come in and learn how they can support American freedmen and who are American freedmen.
Right.
And it allows
Right.
us as American freedmen to hold space for ourselves. you know, so that
Right.
as we come in, we're educating one another, and then we can, if necessary, American freedmen can say, hey, we're going to go in this room and converse during this time period, and someone can stay with everybody else that's new that needs to
Right.
learn. And
Right.
then, so then you're having a communal space, and then it's like, what's the call to action? And it's consistently American freedmen. So this is how you do grassroots community organizing, you know, like you want to,
Right. Exactly.
you want to do that. You want to hold that space, you guys. That's why I'm like, Twitter, you guys, I know social media has its place. It really does. But sometimes it's the old heads backyard. Sometimes it's still the old heads backyard where everybody still comes together and y'all like, yo, we're going to go over brother such and such's house. We're going to meet in the yard. We're going to have some beers, you know, spades, and everybody comes for the spades and the beer. But what they don't know what they about to be hit with is the American Freedmen Commission. You do what you got to do to bring our people together. Like, please don't separate the culture from the movement. Like, we can't do that, you guys. You know what I'm saying? Like, yo, you know what our people come together for? Call them over for a Friday night, and then you hit them up. Yo, sign this, sign this, sign this, sign this. Like, that's what do what is needed to do. Like, this is not the time for us to be acting real special. You know, like we gotta keep it real,
So what you're
real
saying
simple.
is if I get a spades game going, we get everybody come through, you know, fry up some fish, and you know, we like, make sure y'all sign this. I got you. I like that idea.
I did that. I was invited to a jewelry party or whatever, and so one of my friends from here when I first came to Boston, and I always carry my stuff, and everybody broke out with their birth certificate. It was a setup. Antonia, am I American Freedman? I'm American Freedman. I swear to Jesus, that 15 people had their birth certificate. So I got mad at my friend. I said, I thought I came here chill. I pulled out my petition and I put my glasses on. Yep, you're American Freedman. Sign this petition. Yep, you're American Freedman. Sign this petition. I'm serious. You want something? You gotta sign this petition. It was funny though. It was funny.
It works though.
So
as you can see,
it works. It did work. It did work. Sometimes I was told you have to meet people where they're at. I'm saying everybody's not going to be comfortable in all different environments, and I'm willing to do that. I'm asking for people to create the environments. I mean, we've had book clubs, we've had events, we provide food, we give out free books, and sometimes it doesn't work. So where else can we meet people? And so we need to find out how we can put this stuff together. But the most important thing is we have to move with or without the masses, and that's what we did. And we don't want people to think that we're trying to forget them. We just want to make sure everybody has the same level of knowledge we have about American freedmen, and also how to process it so that we can all move together. That's what I wanted out of this. There's a lot of people who don't know what American freedmen is, and so I just want to share that knowledge with them and how to get to where we got. You want to open it up for Q&A?
Yes, indeed. If anybody have any questions, you know, I know a lot of people put certain questions in the chat. You know, raise your hand. Our sister Isla from the Soil, she has her hand up. How you doing, sis?
I'm fine. Oh wait, let's see. I gotta change my purpose. There we are. My question was for Saskia and Antonia. Can I get your email addresses so I can reach out to you guys?
Yes.
Okay. And then the other question
my email address in the chat for you.
Yeah, mine is in the chat.
I haven't
too.
gone back to chat because I just moved from my tablet to my desk.
Okay.
My next question is, you listed out the steps to getting involved. You said attending meetings, then sit down and write what you want by sections, get it organized, and then what was the third part?
Then you take the skeleton or the template to what you want to write and fine tune it. You may need a professional writer at some point, but the best thing to do is put down your ideas. Like, what are you asking for? What do you want to see done? And then once you do the first paragraph, like we want this, then you list why, the harms, why you feel like you're entitled to that. And then the biggest piece is always cite your resources, your collaborations. That's the biggest piece, because these people are big on links. They're big on, where did this resource come from? How did you come to this? And stats are really big as well too.
Okay.
Yeah, they want, and the other thing too, like when you're meeting with them in person and you're talking to them, if you can show them one resource, you know what I'm saying? Okay, good example is like after the Supreme Court ruling came out, when I started talking to people, I'm like, yeah, well, they're like, okay, Anthony, what do you need? One thing will change their whole opinion on everything. Even when I testified, and I said, I just want to confirm the fact that the only reason why I have a problem with 1053 is not legal. Our bill 3921 is the most legal political status that we have. And we all heard about, saying the Supreme Court ruling of no race-based initiative and striking down of affirmative action. And every person that I'm talking to on the chair, they were like, yeah, right. You're right. So if you come up with any fact that can be proven that caters to their mindset, they're fine. But if you keep talking about, oh, we don't have money, we're poor, they don't want to hear that. It has to be factual information, document. It has to be a study. It has to be something that can't be refuted.
Yes, Sister Saskia said that about the racial fatigue. And then just the numbers and the facts and the information.
Yeah, I used the United Nations. You know, the United Nations, you go to their website, that is human rights. That's where your human rights laws come from. So I used international law, right? Because everybody got a boss, right? So there's agreements that this country has made. Geneva Convention, 1948. So we're filing a legal claim. So I try to keep all my sources within based upon law, like I'm referencing law. It was really important to do that because this is the first American Freedmen Commission in the country. So to establish it as law, like we had to make sure that the language in it, if anybody were to sue the city would stand ground before the Supreme Court of the United States. That was how we were looking at the language of the commission, is that if anybody were to sue the city of Cambridge, that this ordinance for this commission would stand before the Supreme Court. And so I think that's very, very important to think about, like to look at that we have a conservative and having conversations with city councilors and state reps, forcing them to acknowledge the overturning of affirmative action, forcing them to acknowledge the dismantling of race-based laws, and forcing them to acknowledge us as American freedmen. You're essentially coming in and giving them a solution. You're telling them this is your problem and this is how you do legal, like policy briefs and stuff like that. And identify the problem, the cause and harm, and you also solution. What's the solution? And what is the backing, the findings, the background to support that argument for this proposed solution. That's like a summary for a policy brief, which is, what you do when you're introducing like a law or something like that. A policymaker has to create these things. And so that's just like, so I use the human rights, transitional justice, and by really stressing human rights, it's like we're helping to, like, you got to acknowledge we're not going anywhere when we make arguments of racial justice. What solutions have been proposed? We're not getting anywhere. Aren't you guys tired? I'm tired. I want to move forward. There's more important things. The earth is on fire. We don't have time for this. Like, we got to wake up, and that's the truth. The earth is on fire. We're going to be dealing in the next 10 to 20 years. There's going to be massive tornadoes. There's going to be massive hurricanes and floodings. We already see the floodings happening. And, New York is dealing with Boston. We're dealing with massive floodings. Like, this is not, we don't have time to go back and forth on this anymore, you guys. We really are on a short window, and it's not even just the United States. It's because this country is being demanded by the international countries about climate justice. This is a global conversation with increasing pressure being applied, and we are way out of inbound to meet expectations for any climate justice goals. So there can start to be fines, international fines for countries that are not meeting requirements and stuff like that. We don't know. So we really need to get this conversation forward and start speaking in a language that they're speaking in, and they're speaking about human rights. So that strengthens our argument, because we too are talking about human rights. And wherever you could find compatibility, like, hey, I'm here to help you, then, like, this is what's being asked. It's not that complex. I literally said, what do you, this shouldn't even be an argument. I present it to them like this because this is a headline right here. Is the United States more racist in 2023 than in 1865? That's essentially what the American Freedmen community is asking. Is the United States more racist in 2023 and 1865? Because in 1865, we had the Freedmen's Bureau. Why is it impossible to bring this back? When the streets are crying, invest in our community. Why is this such an impossible request? And so when you present it that way and you'll be able to connect like everything in that manner, they're like, you make sense.
Right.
This
So,
sense.
Saskia,
This
can I just
sounds
say this? I'm sorry, Saskia, can I say this? I'm more of a United States kind of person, facts. First of all, we were emancipated. We were promised 40 acres of field. They lied. They gave that to the white people. They gave it to the white slave owners. Then I go to the fact of you established the American Freedmen Bureau. What happened to it? Why does the Bureau of Indian Affairs still exist, but the Freedmen Bureau don't? That's how I tell them. I keep it real. I mean, bottom line. Okay, we had the Freedmen Bank. We all know it was privilege. The money was stolen. It's never been corrected. And then in 2021, you take the name of the bank and you open it up for funds for all Black Lives Matter. What happened to the original harm party? I always go back to the original harm party. And that's what I tell people in mixed groups. And they get in arguments with me and I look at them, I'm like, I can't, you have to go to the original harm party. You can't have reparations without American freedmen ancestors. You can't. I could never go to a foreign country and be like, I gotta sleep on the dirt floor. Oh my God, and clutch my pearls and sue their government and say, if you all want to live like that, I don't. You have to go to the original harm parties. If they're affected by it, you have to go with them, get your rules together, and say, do you guys find this to be substandard? If they do, then you sue based on that. And so a lot of people are trying to skip the line. So I don't even do international. I do what happens in the United States, what's real, what makes sense, and I do comparatory damages. Comparatory damages are if somebody has been harmed almost equal to the amount of you and they've been compensated or paid, then that makes it justifiable for us to be paid. So I'm going to give you a good example. The immigrants have been getting reparations. The first set of immigrants were offered reparations. The ACLU backs them. The minute they got $1, we can sue for comparatory damages. They say that they have anxiety, they're stressed out, they separated from their families. We had anxiety, we were separated from our families, so that's comparatory damages. So that's why I stick with the United States law. Saskia is more good with the international law. I can only go by what my family went through, what I seen, what I experienced here. You know, for me personally, I don't know how far the international law reaches. I go by what's on the books. What's on the books, what was established, what was said, what wasn't done, what was failed, and why are these group of people, like Ali said, the five civilized tribes, they're freedmen. How come their name stuck? Why didn't our name stick? What's the difference? Explain that to me. And I try to have these conversations with people. They're like, yeah, you're right. You're absolutely right, Antonia. That's how I get them every time. We would be okay.
My bad, y'all. Let me jump in. Because I see we got Brother Jay Alexander with his hand up.
Okay.
Good to see you on here. Hold on 1 second, though, bro. You know, a lot of us, we interact on Twitter, but I just want to make an announcement for those who put in applications with United Sons and Daughters of Freedmen. Those that paid their dues, your membership applications will be going out this week. This is Sister Islands right here in the forefront. So yours, it was supposed to go out yesterday, but I messed up and I would have had to drive back another 30 or 40 minutes.
I can't see, but do you have my name spelled right there? Because my name the way I have it spelled on here and on Twitter is phonetically because everybody just messes it up since birth.
No, I got you. I got you, ILA. Yeah. I got you. Okay. But these are the certificates. They're going out this week. I'm gonna put the stamp, the seal in the middle. I'm gonna mail them out hopefully tomorrow, and we're gonna go from there. So I just wanted to give an update for those that
I'm
are
waiting
listening.
because I got a space here on the wall.
That's what's up. That's what's up. But that was it. That was it. Brother Jay Alexander, Brandon, what's going on, brother? Oh, you're welcome.
Peace to the room. Peace to the room. Appreciation to everybody that can you hear me?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay. Appreciation to everybody that made this thing come together, and everybody that presented and gave the information. Very useful information. My question was actually to Brother Nyhiem, and I'm glad that you just spoke about the membership. I was seeing that there are several brothers or several people from California here in the chat and online, and I was wondering about the chapters for United Sons and Daughters of American Freemen. I understand that we all are American Freemen, but we all are not United Sons and Daughters of American Freemen. So what I wanted to know was how many members or how many people are needed to open a chapter, particularly if we have several people on the call here that are in San Joaquin Valley area. We're fairly, close to each other. How is it that we can create a chapter where we can also be eyes and ears on the ground and have a resource to touch into and reach into? And I just had these kind of questions pending. I wanted to talk to you on the back channel before I send my dues in, but my dues checks is coming in as well. And so, but I wanted to ask that. And the other thing that I wanted to point out was the importance of the Freedmen Bureau or Freedmen Affairs. I mean, when a lot of people, I've been in several of these rooms and I've heard people ask, like, what is it supposed to look like? What is it? How is it supposed to be? And what do we need it for? And so I always kind of think that it should mirror something like the Department of Veteran Affairs. The Department of Veteran Affairs runs a program benefiting veterans and members of their family. It offers education opportunities and rehabilitation services and provide compensation payments for disabilities or death related to military service, home loan guarantees, pensions, burials, health care, and includes services in nursing home clinics and medical centers, as well as a whole lot of other things. So when they ask, well, what would it be structured like? We can use the Bureau of Indian Affairs. We can also use the Department of Veteran Affairs, because the Department of Veteran Affairs, although we're all Americans, we are not all veterans, and they specifically take care of a certain status of Americans and provide them with certain benefits and compensation, which is another word for reparations. Compensations for any injuries or any problems that they have occurred while serving in the United States Army. And not only that, but they also give them government resources and home loans and educational benefits and all these things that help them along the way. So I see that if they just created the Department of Freedmen Affairs, or the Bureau, recreated it in that structure, along with some of the things that particularly affect us as a people, we would have the Bureau that we need. The other thing that I asked, I thought that I heard someone say that they are in Boston, like one of the presenters.
Yes, I'm in Boston. Jonathan's in Boston. Saskia's in Cambridge. We're in Massachusetts. Where are you?
My question, I'm in Bakersfield, California, home of Kevin McCarthy. He'll be back here soon, unfortunately. But what I did want to say was, in Boston, buried at Copp's Hill Cemetery is a very famous freeman by the name of Prince Hall. And Prince Hall, along with 14 other freedmen, existed in the time of George Washington and John Adams. Yep. They are founding fathers of this country. They are, in order to be a Prince Hall Freemason, in order to be a Freemason, you must be a free man. You cannot be an indentured servant or a slave in order to be a Freemason. So in 1775 or 1774, he became, him and 14 other freemen. So at this time in Virginia, they were property owners, voters, community activists. He opened his own school to provide education to freedmen children. He petitioned the Massachusetts state legislature for the funds to educate freedmen, and he also petitioned to make General George Washington to allow freedmen to serve in the Continental Army. So these things are happening simultaneously with the founding of our country, a freedman. And so I just think that I know that we often concentrate on the 13th Amendment and the 14th Amendment and the Civil War with the birth of freedmen, but freedmen existed at the founding of this nation. And right there in Massachusetts is a very famous freedman. And this is the last thing that I would say, is that grievances and harms. I believe that was Sister Sasha that said that we must be able to trace the grievances and harms that extend all the way back to slavery up until today. Is that correct?
Yeah.
One of the things that is still happening today within Prince Hall Masonry, and a lot of y'all may not know, the reason that there is a Prince Hall Masonry is that still many Black freedmen Masons are not accepted and recognized within white lodges in America today. we
Oh, they're
can't
not.
get
No,
back to
they're
doing.
not.
So
They're
it is
not.
still going
They're not.
on from the founding of the nation, which is the reason why Prince Hall had to go to the Irish military lines to become a Mason, because he wouldn't be recognized here in America. But it has still been going on since the beginning of time, since the beginning of the founding of the nation to right now. I, as a Prince Hall Freemason, 32nd degree, cannot walk into certain white lodges in America. So I just wanted to say that. And
Oh, that's
Can I just
excellent.
say one thing
Excellent.
quick?
yeah,
Yeah, go ahead,
Can I
Sister
just say one
Antonia.
quick thing, quick, Nyhiem? We ask for Office of Freedmen Affairs in all of our bills. It's in our proposal, and it's also in known information in our testimony. So we're asking for Office of Freedmen Affairs from the commission or from the task force.
what I would
Mhm.
also say to this, and I think that is a resource that has not yet been tapped into, at least I haven't heard, but you know, the brother Nyhiem, they do a lot of work behind the scenes and off of Twitter. So I know that, you know, oftentimes I've hit him and he said, oh, we're already working on that, bro. So one of the things I want to say though is Masons, particularly Prince Hall Masons, keep excellent records. They have to, of all their membership, of all their freedmen's, of everybody that own property and their positions and everything in life, all the way back to the very beginning. So if you need, in addition to Freedman Rose, if you have a grandfather or great-great-grandfather that you know is a Prince Hall Freemason, then that may also be your ticket, because he'll also be on the rolls of that lodge in that state. And I think that we already have the establishments with the lodges that's in every state, and most of them in every city, to go in and give the education starting with them, because Prince Hall Freemasons are freedmen. That's the qualification. The Prince Hall Freemasons are freedmen.
That's right. That's right.
So,
Let me jump
so
in,
I
bro.
think that just by tapping in with that right there, we would tap into a resource already established,
I got
halls
you.
already established, and get the education out to the masses. And I think that every Grand Lodge should have a commission or a representative in connection with the American Freemen, so that education is being shared
I got you.
inside the lodge and outside the lodge. And that's my contribution. Thanks again.
Definitely. Thank you, man. That was powerful, first and foremost. We definitely honor Prince Hall over here. We mention him a lot in our breakdowns. We're definitely going to be mentioning him in upcoming projects as it pertains to Boston. To answer your first question first, yes, the United Sons and Daughters of Freedmen are branching out, and we are establishing chapters, and it takes 3 people to start a chapter, right? 3 people only, because when we incorporate in that state, we want to make sure that those qualifications are met, which is usually the qualifications of the state. Now, we may say, okay, well, you got to get 7 people, but for now, the minimum qualification is 3 people. And these are 3 people that we're hoping that people are building with. So if you have somebody in California right now that's on this call, y'all might not be in the same city, but y'all are in the state that y'all can connect, that you can connect with, so we can get a United Sons and Daughters of Freedmen chapter established in the state of California with sub branches. And, you know, whether they're in Los Angeles, San Francisco, et cetera, there will be one main office, sort of like a Grand Lodge. In fact, it's going to operate similarly like the Grand Lodge of a state and the several lodges that are subordinate to it. So that's definitely, yes, that we're going to definitely be doing that. I want to share something real quick to answer your second inquiry. Give me 1 second about that the Freedmen's Office of Freedmen Affairs, because something that I shared earlier from Charles Sumner, he was noting how let me know if y'all could see that. Did it come up? Oh no, the wrong thing came up. Hold on. The wrong thing came up. Hold on. He was talking about how these bureaus have, we have all of these different bureaus. I'm sorry, I got distracted a little bit. So this is what I put together for the state of South Carolina. Brother Marcel did some edits to it, and it's a proposal for an Office of Freedmen Affairs in the state of South Carolina. You all see the date, March 2023. And I'll go into it just a little bit. This brief offers an overview of a proposed Office of Freedmen Affairs in the state of South Carolina and some of the functionality of this proposed office in relation to South Carolina's American freedmen communities. And I give the definition, purpose. An Office of Freedmen Affairs would be established to aid American freedmen families, address issues related to underserved freedmen communities, and help to better that portion of South Carolina's citizenry, among other purposes. The Office of Freedmen Affairs shall be established for, not limited to, the purposes of establishing a central office in the state of South Carolina, proper census counting and disaggregation for data collection, rental, mortgage, utility, and other assistance, genealogical services to better identify who is an American freedman, ensuring labor and other contracts are awarded proportionate to the state's population, to promote civic engagement and education, help provide shelter and services for the homeless, state repatriation assistance for those looking to relocate to South Carolina, and to promote quality of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. So we are definitely, we're on it. We're on it, fam. So we have a lot of different things that we have drawn up, and we're trying to build. We're trying to build with our family, and we're hoping that you all have found value in this particular workshop to want to connect with us, to want to work more with us so that we can advance these proposals in all the different states that we are in. So, yeah, man, definitely. And again, just to go back to Prince Hall, we definitely honor Prince Hall. I'm thinking about walking through a Prince Hall Lodge myself, getting them first 3 degrees, which to me are the main and really only 3 degrees. But, some people, they have their debates about that. We ain't going to get into that right now. But, yeah, man, thank you for that, brother. Thank you. Anybody else have any questions that they want to ask? If not, we're going to start winding it down. It's Sunday. It's approaching 7. I know it's dinner time for me, approaching soon. So I know everybody, I know everybody's on different time zones as well. So y'all people in Cali, y'all still full of lunch. We started around lunchtime. So anybody have any questions?
I just want to share an affirmation. You guys just think that like this time next year, there will be multiple American Freedmen Commissions across the country, and there will be multiple states moving to file, if they have not already filed, a state Office of Freedmen Affairs. Like, we're speaking it into existence, you guys. Like, we're gonna be in a totally different place this time next year. It's beautiful. Like, this is really, really the tipping point. It's really, really y'all are beautiful.
Thank you. Can I just say something, Nyhiem? I just want to
go ahead, sis.
I just want to thank Saskia, Jonathan, Elijah is Jonathan's son, Nyhiem, Ali, Nyhiem, Sister Riri. I mean, it took a team to put the final touches on this stuff. So I don't want you guys to think it wasn't hard work. It was very, 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 very hard work. And the only thing that kept me focused was the ancestors. That's who I live for, the ancestors. And so Saskia did a lot of work in her community by herself. And then pulled it through. You know what I'm saying? I was able to assist her. So I really want to take my hat off to her because she did create the first American Freedmen Commission. That says a lot. I know a lot of people don't understand that, but to me, that's like everything right now, and it can't be refuted. It can't be taken back. This is it. So a lot of work has gone into it, but nothing that we can't handle. But I just want to say thank you to the team. Thank you for the knowledge. I wouldn't have been able to do this if it wasn't for the knowledge that I received from the United Sons and Daughters. I wouldn't be able to share that knowledge with, Saskia. And so we really appreciate the team effort that took place to make this happen. I do. And I want to make sure you guys appreciate it and utilize it as well, too.
Oh, indeed, honest. Somebody's trying to come in, but we're already at the end of the
Yes.
workshop. So, yeah, somebody said, when is the next one? I'm loving the love that's in the chat. The next one is going to be sometime next month. We're going to have Brother Ibrahim and Brother Josh. Like, that's going to be important because, you know, they're going to bring us back to square one, right? We have the Freedmen information it was kind of like the missing piece. It's like, what is that thing that gets us over the hump? But, you know, Brother Ibrahim with his political analysis, even Brother Josh's political analysis is on point. But they're going to get into the like, especially Josh, we're going to get back into the numbers of reparations. We're going to get into modern monetary theory so people can gain an understanding of exactly how this government is going to pay for reparations. These are conversations that are not necessarily being had. And I think that, you know, these are empowering. These types of workshops are empowering, and it makes you want to do something, right? We have the conversations, and I don't doubt that many of us want to do something. It's just sometimes we don't have the direction, you know, we don't have marching orders, et cetera, et cetera. Naturally, we are going to promote United Sons and Daughters of Freedmen. We're going to ask people to join our organization. As you all can see, you know, regardless of the nonsense that may go on Twitter, we are about this work. We are about this work. And each organization each chapter that's established, you know, we have our bylaws, but they're going to be able to draft their particular version of the United Sons and Daughters of Freedmen based on their state, right? California and New York is two different monsters, right? You might have to tame these beasts, if you will, a little differently. You might have to use different tactics than you would use in a South Carolina or Georgia, et cetera, et cetera. And so, you know, we're flexible in that regard. And like I always say, we're just trying to build. Some of the fights that are happening, they're necessary because it's allowing us to see who's who and where certain people stand. And if the things that they are pushing is going to advance the movement. We've done this workshop. We've offered people the opportunity to question us on anything that they may think is just not right and exact, or if they needed further clarity on. And we haven't received any questions about something that someone felt is not right and exact, right? And feel free to email me. I put my email in the chat, Nyhiem@usadof.org. Feel free to email our sister Antonia, sister Saskia, brother Ali, the presenters here today. Shout out to everybody that came through. I see all of the fam that's here, and I see people that I wasn't expecting to see as well, and I see some names that I'm not familiar with, and I pray that you all were able to, come with an empty chalice, if you will, and let us pour into that that vessel so that you can take what we feel are life. This is life-saving for us at the end of the day. Like I believe that was Sister Antonia saying, if this is a one-shot deal. If we don't get this done now, and I repeat, our children will be living in tent cities. Our grandchildren will be living in tent cities in the country that our ancestors were forced to build for free. And we cannot let that happen. We can't. So, okay, Brother Derek, go ahead, brother.
Yeah, sorry, I don't mean to hold anybody up, but I just wanted to thank everybody. First, I wanted to thank all of the presenters for y'all doing this. Really appreciate that. It was a beautiful presentation. And lastly, I wanted to thank everybody here for their commitment with regards to reparations and us fighting to restore our people. So I want to thank y'all all. Keep your heads up, and we're going to do this. That's it.
Indeed, brother. Honors, and shout out to the DMV Freedmen, man. Shout out to you, brother. Our sister Roz, who is in the building. Shout out to all of the family all across the country, man. Let's do it. Let's do it. Listen out for the next one. Go to the website if you've not joined our email list, usadof.org. Join the email list. get notified. You know, we send out emails. I mean, I'm excited. I'm at a loss for words right now. So let me not mess up the rest of my closing argument. I'll leave you all with the saying of our platform, which is don't just fight the power, family. Become the power. And that's what Sister Antonia and Saskia showed us today. How to become the power, how to get what we want in legislation and put that in the hands of the people that we need to put it in the hands of until we are walking it in ourselves as the representatives of our constituency where we reside. So don't just fight the power, become the power, and then and only then will you have the power to make a change. And with that, I say peace, peace, peace.